Chapter 923. Other than being framed and being made a scapegoat, everything else went smoothly. Except for the last 2 sections of the cement road from Lon City to the Yun Nation, the rest of the road had been built. It was expected to be completed in another 4 months. With this road, the travel time between Lon City and the Yun Nation could be reduced by half, and a lot of manpower and material consumption could be reduced when transporting supplies. Ren Bachien had already started to prepare for the construction of the second official road. He originally envisioned that the second road would be from Lon City to Tiesua Pass, which was originally an important border town of Great Xia and was now the location of the Protectorate of the North. However, Ren Bachien now planned to build the official road from Lon City to the Protectorate of the Southeast. This was the only way to transport large amounts of coal and rubber. The transportation of large amounts of resources was the most important thing now. Since Great Xia couldn't take care of itself and couldn't take care of the South, the road to the Protectorate of the North wasn't that meaningful. The Zhang family from the Yun Nation had recruited a large number of people to Lon City. In particular, these blacksmiths from the Yun Nation had brought a lot of new technology to Dayo. Although Ren Bachien directly took out the blast furnace and hydraulic forging equipment, these indigenous methods of the blacksmiths from the Yun Nation played a great role in many areas and greatly improved the smelting standards of Lon City. The improvement of this technology could be seen from the layers of beautiful satin patterns on the swords and knives on the market recently. The most important thing was that the first diesel internal combustion engine prototype was finally successfully produced after many explosions. Although it was still a little crude and needed to be improved and reduced over the generations, this was expected. The most important point was that Dayo had produced the first diesel internal combustion engine, which meant that the craftsmanship and materials had met the basic requirements. This was what Ren Bachien was concerned about. However, Ren Bachien discovered a bad sign. At present, the goal of the group of rascals from the Black Bamboo Academy's first year of high school seemed to be a little off. They seemed to be more interested in researching how to make the internal combustion engine explode more violently. This could be seen from the recent explosion accidents at the Diesel Internal Combustion Engine Research Institute. Although the principle of the internal combustion engine was to generate power through explosions, Ren Bachien had to raise his gun and shoot for another 5 minutes as a warning when a wall of the research institute was blown up. However, this group of bastards had learned to move like a snake now. After more than half a month, Ren Bachien finally saw Li Yuanzhu, who had returned. The head you wanted. Li Yuanzhu, who was dressed in a Taoist robe, placed a box on the table. I did what I promised you. But what about Luo Hua sect? I have been framed. Ren Bachien smiled bitterly. This matter really has nothing to do with me. If I wanted to, I wouldn't have agreed to it back then. Directly using a nuclear bomb would be the most effective deterrent. Since I've promised you, there's no need to do anything unnecessary. Li Yuanzhu nodded and said faintly, I think so too. You wouldn't do such an unwise thing. Are there any clues? No, we got the news too late. We couldn't find any clues at the scene. Moreover, the other party stopped after attacking once. Now, we can only wait for him to attack again. Li Yuanzhu thought for a while and said, recently, there has been a lot of discussion about this in Great Xia. This time, it's different from Qi Zixiao destroying the 9 pavilions. The 9 pavilions had a bad reputation, and many people resented them. Although there were some people who complained about it, there were also many people who applauded it. The impact of this matter was more about Qi Zixiao being able to destroy the 9 pavilions alone. However, Luo Hua sect is completely different this time. All the sects reacted very strongly, probably feeling sympathy for the loss of their own kind. If the aboriginals can do whatever they want in Great Xia and wipe out an entire sect, Luo Hua sect will become them tomorrow. They are in Great Xia, but they have to worry about the aboriginals. Do you understand this feeling, Prince Zhao? I understand, but this matter can't be explained clearly, and no one will listen. We can only wait for the murderer to appear again. Zhenren Li, have you been affected? Ren Bachien asked. It's fine. You don't have to think too much, Prince Zhao, Li Yuanzhu replied faintly. Ren Bachien nodded and said, if Zhen Yi sect encounters any trouble, we can move to the Yun Nation. We share the same roots and culture as Great Xia. Li Yuanzhu glanced at Rinpochen and said, Prince Zhao, you have underestimated our Zhen Yi sect. If we run away when we encounter trouble, Zhen Yi sect won't be able to survive for nearly 1,000 years. Rinpochen laughed it off as it was just a suggestion. If Zhen Yi sect really moved to the Yun nation, he would welcome it. However, the possibility was almost zero. Li Yuanzhu looked indifferent, but she was actually quite stubborn. You have worked hard, Jinren Li. Rinpochen opened the box and saw a person's head that had been salted with lime. His face could still be vaguely seen. However, Rinpochen was a little surprised. Su Xianxian? It was Zhao Prince Zhao who poisoned him. Are you still surprised? Li Yuanzhu's tone wasn't dissatisfied, and she spoke very casually. Poison? Rinpochen was even more surprised. When did he poison him? He was already poisoned before I went. Zhao Prince Zhao is surprised. Could it be that you didn't poison him? Li Yuanzhu was a little puzzled when she saw Rinpochen's reaction. Rinpochen frowned and shook his head. I didn't poison him. It seems that the murderer has been eyeing Su Xianxian for a long time. However, Su Xianxian is the 23rd most powerful expert in the world. How could he be targeted so easily? The other party's strength seems to be unexpectedly strong. Li Yuanzhu closed her eyes slightly, opened them a moment later, and said, no matter who they are, they will eventually give themselves away. Rinpochen didn't know about Su Xianxian's experience. He didn't know that Su Xianxian had stayed in the center of the nuclear explosion for 10 days and even carried a large piece of glass from the explosion with him. He only lost his hair and had some problems, but he was already considered a strong spirit will expert. If he were an ordinary person, he would have died more than once. However, Su Xianxian thought that it was Rinpochen who poisoned him and naturally wouldn't say what he had done. Li Yuanzhu thought that it was Rinpochen who poisoned him and naturally didn't ask any more questions. Rinpochen knew that he hadn't poisoned Su Xianxian, but Su Xianxian had been poisoned. He subconsciously thought that someone had done something behind the scenes and didn't think that Su Xianxian had stayed in the center of the nuclear explosion for too long and was affected by the radiation. An inexplicable misunderstanding occurred just like that, causing Rinpochen to overestimate the strength of the mastermind. Rinpochen thought for a moment and said, besides Su Xianxian, there seemed to be 2 other people in the vicinity that day, but they didn't show themselves. If Su Xianxian was targeted, then someone must have known about what happened at that time, which led to the series of events that followed. Those 2 people were the most suspicious, and it wasn't impossible for those who joined the Go Home organization to be involved. Rinpochen felt that he should start with those 2 people, but he had to pay attention to the others as well. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving to take a look at the 60,000 mountains. Give me that radio station of yours if you have more, Li Yuanzhu said. Rinpochen naturally agreed to this request. After sending her off the next day, Rinpochen learned the identities of those 2 people from the experts who went to the 60,000 mountains. Miao Yulong, the fallen phoenix hairpin, and Ruan San, the water dragon king. It just so happened that these 2 people had enmity with the aboriginals. The former's good friend was killed by Hong Wu, while the latter had 1 ear and 1 eye cut off by Qi Ziding. Following the order, the embroidered uniform guards in the rearguard commandery began to investigate the 2 people. On the other hand, Rinpochen had to return to Earth to pick up a group of 11 people, including 6 physicists, 2 chemists, 1 zoologist, 1 botanist, and 1 mathematician. This group of people was Ning Tsaichen's harvest these days. They would be the first batch of high-end talents in this world. Chapter 924. There was a slight distortion in the air, and a stick of candied hawthorn appeared out of thin air. To be exact, it was a person and a string of people tied up with a rope. Rinpochen was holding onto a rope that had 12 people tied up. There was 1 more person than expected. This was Ning Tsaichen's harvest and a very important person who could speak many languages. Such a person was simply too useful to Rinpochen. Not only were the 12 people blindfolded, but they were also unconscious. Rinpochen loosened the rope, carried the box, and opened the door to summon the guards. Keep an eye on these people. The guards were shocked when they came in. On one hand, It was because there were suddenly more than 10 people in the room, but more so because of their appearance. They had sunken eyes, big noses, red, yellow, and chestnut hair, and 2 of them were as black as carbon. Are these mountain spirits? The 2 guards immediately admired Renbachien. They didn't expect Zhao Prince Consort to capture the rumored mountain spirits. Let me know when they wake up. Renbachien nodded slightly. Since they misunderstood them as mountain spirits, he would let them be. He went back to see the Empress first. Did you bring anything for me? The Empress looked at Renbachien's hand expectantly as if she was waiting for her husband to return from a trip with a message. Well, she was actually just bored and wanted to see something new. Clang, clang, clang. Renbachien walked around, placed the box on the table in front of the Empress, and asked, "Your Majesty, guess what's inside?" Anyway, it's not sorghum liquor. The Empress chuckled and was in a good mood. She had long sensed that Renbachien thought that alcohol had an effect on the ball in her stomach. Although she didn't think it was a problem, she still drank less alcohol and more calcium milk. Although she really liked the sweet and sour taste, it didn't mean that this drink could replace alcohol. Even though she was the most respected person in the world, she also understood that there had to be tolerance and compromise between 2 people when they were together. Many people from Earth in Renbachien's generation didn't understand this point. It was obvious that the Empress had put in a lot of effort. The latest 3D projection device. Renbachien opened the box and saw a box-like device and a few pairs of glasses. This was the latest experimental model, and its usage was similar to that of a computer. The screen was projected directly into the air, and there was no need for fog like before. However, it required special glasses. Most importantly, this device was completely controlled by the mind. It was completely separated from the buttons, mouse, keyboard, and controller. How do I use it? The Empress was very interested. Your Majesty, put on these glasses and press this button. Whatever you want to do after that, Your Majesty only needs to think about it. You can watch movies and play games. Renbachien put the glasses on the Empress's head. He then put on a pair of glasses for himself and taught her how to use them. Through their glasses, the 2 of them could see the hologram projected from the top of the box. The width was 4.5 meters and the height was about 2.8 meters. This was a common height for residential buildings on Earth. For the Empress, who had always been using a laptop, this size was already a huge surprise. She felt that her entire field of vision was covered by the screen. With a thought from the Empress, the icons of various television dramas appeared on the screen. Following which, the Empress chose a television series. It's exactly the same as the real thing, the Empress said in surprise. The television series that appeared on the screen was completely 3-dimensional. It was as if the real person was right in front of her. Renbachien hugged the Empress and watched the television series for a while. The Empress had a smile on her face throughout. This gift was simply too much to her liking. Renbachien brought back a few pairs of glasses and gave 1 pair to Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. After all, the Empress looked at the scenes that others couldn't see and made all kinds of expressions, giving people the impression that she was a fool. Moreover, there were many times when one could only see things that one could see, and it was far less enjoyable than seeing the same things as others. The people who were brought back woke up that night, and Renbachien went to see them the next day. Sir, they woke up last night and were making a lot of noise. I persuaded them a little, and they quickly quietened down, the guard said to Renbachien. Well done. Renbachien nodded. He knew all too well how the Aboriginals persuaded people. Everyone, this is the 2nd time we meet. Renbachien opened the door and saw everyone panicking. He smiled and greeted them. Then he understood why these people quickly quietened down. Most of them had bruises and swollen faces. One of them seemed to have a broken arm, and another was sitting on the ground dragging his leg. Sure enough, it was the usual method of persuading people used by the Aboriginals. However, it didn't matter as long as they weren't dead. The medicine in this world was pretty effective. Moreover, it would also let the other party know who was the boss here. Seeing a burly man like Renbachien come in, the crowd couldn't hide their panic at first. Then they started to make noise like a market. The content was nothing more than, "Who are you? Where is this?" This is kidnapping and I'm going to sue you. Can you understand what I'm saying? Translate. Ren Baqien pointed to a woman who was as black as charcoal. She was about 30 years old and only wore a set of underwear. Who are you? What are you doing? Where is this place? The black woman asked in Mandarin with a northeastern accent. Ren Baqien immediately felt a sense of familiarity. Welcome to the Chief God's space. Think about it carefully. Don't you have more things in your heads? Ren Baqien smiled. Just kidding. Welcome to my world. Ren Baqien laughed. Well, it's still a joke. Welcome to a whole new world, Ren Baqien finally said. After making a few jokes in a row, these people immediately became angry. However, Ren Baqien didn't care about what they thought. Although these people could be considered fellow countrymen, he had too many fellow countrymen, more than 7 billion of them. The reason why he chose foreign scholars this time was that it was easier to deal with them. If they were Chinese, they would have to consider their feelings and country at the same time. First of all, I have to tell you a very unfortunate piece of news. You can't go back and will have to live here. You need to work for me, analyze everything in this world, and do what I want you to do. If you do well, I won't treat you harshly. You can spend the rest of your lives here. Anyway, you have no family on Earth and nothing to worry about. Moreover, this is a whole new world with new rules and full of unknowns. Isn't this the best reward for you? After the black woman translated in English and Spanish, the crowd suddenly became noisy again. You're a liar. I don't believe it. This is impossible. You're lying to us. This is kidnapping. You will go to jail. Ren Baqien couldn't understand such words anyway. He just exerted force with his feet, and the tiles on the ground suddenly exploded. As Ren Baqien stretched out his palm, a spear appeared in his hand. After brandishing it, the gold and silver spear turned into a bolt of lightning and pierced into the ground. An iron chain came out of Ren Baqien's body and tied up the tall white man who shouted the loudest like a snake. It kept shrinking inward as if it wanted to break all the bones in the other party's body. Such a miraculous scene caused everyone to open their mouths wide, momentarily speechless. Do you understand now? Law. Here I am the law. As I said, this is a whole new world, completely different from Earth. What you have to do is what I want you to do. Ren Baqien smiled kindly at everyone. Come on, I'll show you. Ren Baqien waved his hand, turned around, and walked out. Everyone was a little uneasy, but they still followed him. They were eager to know what this place was and whether what Ren Baqien said was true. The first thing they saw were 2 bear-like guards. The ferocity and savagery of these people left a deep impression on them, and they immediately shivered. After looking around carefully, they saw a magnificent palace and a blue sky that was bluer than Earth. With a cry of surprise, a white woman in her 50s rushed toward the garden in front of her. She opened her eyes wide and carefully examined the various plants in the garden, exclaiming in surprise. Chapter 9:25. As the plants in the garden attracted the botanist, the birds in the trees and the insects in the garden also attracted the zoologist. In particular, he couldn't take his eyes off the bees that were the size of a finger. One had to know that the largest honeybee on Earth was only 1.5 to 1.8 centimeters long, but the bees flying in the garden were more than 6 centimeters long. They were even bigger than the tiger-head bee. At this moment, they were flying around the flowers, and it was obvious that they were picking the pollen. These bees were enough to surprise him, not to mention the birds in the trees that he had never seen before. The atmospheric pressure here is higher than normal, a physicist with a swollen face said with a frown. In fact, he had already noticed this when he first arrived, but he didn't say it out loud. After Ren Baqien said that this was another world, the incredulous crowd began to search for the differences between this world and Earth in order to find an answer. Ren Baqien brought everyone to the courtyard where the Crow General was. In his opinion, Qi Shui was more convincing. However, Qi Shui lay at the bottom of the lake every day and wouldn't come out unless the Empress called for it. Fortunately, the 3.5 meters tall Crow General was scary enough. It stood there like a wall, and its black feathers reflected the light of metal. Ren Baqien patted the side of the Crow General's body, but it only turned to look at him before closing its eyes to rest. Oh my God, this is simply as miraculous as King Kong. The biologist exclaimed and rushed forward to stroke the crow general's feathers. The crow general simply waved its wings, which were relatively short compared to its body size, and sent the biologist flying. He spat out blood in midair. In the face of a cardinal heaven expert, ordinary people were simply too weak and insignificant. The others were immediately shocked. See if he's still breathing. Get someone from the clinic to come over. Rinpoche called over the guards, turned to the crowd and warned, I'm not responsible for your lives. You have to be responsible for yourselves. You have to understand that in this world, apart from your brains and knowledge, you are as fragile as a baby in other aspects. Everyone looked at the biologist who was lying on the ground, gasping for air. Their faces turned pale, and their eyes were filled with fear. However, in the afternoon, the biologist was alive and kicking again. Well, it was still a little worse than being alive and kicking, but at least he was able to walk and his life was saved. Looking at his guilty expression, it was clear that the crow general had taught him a lesson. At night, everyone saw two moons in the sky. One was a very big red moon, and the other was only half the size of the moon that Earthlings knew of. Everyone finally dispelled the last bit of hope in their hearts. This was not Earth. Of course, there was a lot of evidence, but these two moons were even more direct and inexplicable. The next day, when Rinpoche saw everyone again, he wore his trademark, good-natured smile. Everyone, do you have any more questions about what I said? How did we get here? We seem to have been kidnapped and locked up for a period of time. Did you do it? Or you? Everyone discussed for the whole night and finally reached a consensus. This was a problem that everyone was very concerned about. You are the chosen ones by the Lord God, members of Earth's advanced team. You shoulder the expectations of your respective countries and all of humanity. Although I really want to say that I never lie. That's right, you've been kidnapped to a completely different world. Aren't you curious? Apart from Earth, there's another planet with humans living on it. You didn't come here by spacecraft, but by some more magical method. What I want you to do is to uncover the most fundamental secret of this world, the rules of this world. Rinpoche was very patient with these people. After all, he needed the knowledge in their minds, so he didn't mind spending some time answering their questions. He waited for the black woman to translate in both languages before speaking again. As for me, I'm an official of this country, one of the higher-ups of this country, and I can decide your life and death. Of course, I know what you want to ask. That's right, I'm also an Earthling. As soon as he said this, there was indeed some change in their gazes. They were burning, probing, and, of course, dissatisfied and fearful. From this, one could see the personalities of these people. Some people had a stronger desire for knowledge and were eager to explore the unknown. Such a world was obviously a treasure for them. There were also some people who were knowledgeable, but in many ways, they were no different from ordinary people. They would be afraid, disappointed, and resentful. Of course, without their knowledge, they were just ordinary people. I've prepared a research institute for you. Don't even think about escaping. With your looks, you will be treated as monsters and beaten to death in minutes. Of course, you won't have the chance to escape. I just hope that you won't make any wrong choices. How you will fare in the future will depend on whether or not you can meet my requirements. Don't worry, I'm a tolerant person and won't be too harsh on you. In fact, you will only be valued here, valued by me. On Earth, you are all people who are marginalized, mediocre, and overshadowed by the brilliance of others. In this case, you should be cheering. Here, you are the only you. After the black woman finished translating, someone immediately argued, my research is about to produce results, and all the physicists will remember my name. Sorry, you won't have a chance. However, you can let everyone in this world remember your name. Rinpoche spread his hands. Now that you understand the situation, I'll give you 1 day to sort out your emotions. Tomorrow, I'll send you to the Research Institute. Before this, Rinpoche had already built a research institute in the nearby mountains. It was about half a day's journey from Lon City on a fast horse. If he rode the Crow General, it would only take 2 hours. May I ask what your name is? Are you Chinese? Did the mystical martial arts from China come from this world? A man suddenly asked, and the black woman translated. Very smart. Rinpoche gave a thumbs up. I like smart people, so I won't lie to you. That's right, it came from here. As for me, you can call me Zhao Prince Consort. Does the Chinese government know about this place? Does our government know about this place? Maybe they do, but no one can come here. This isn't a place that can be reached with current technology. This isn't the moon, Mars, anywhere in the solar system, or anywhere in the Milky Way galaxy. It's not even in the same universe. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that the universe isn't unique. Parallel worlds do exist. As for the rest, you will have to discover them. Rinpoche spoke to everyone, leaving them to think and sort out their emotions. He still had other things to do. Mr. Zhao, can you give us some clothes? The black woman tried to suppress her panic and smiled at Rinpoche. She was still pretty on earth, but in Rinpoche's eyes, the only valuable thing was her brain. She was wearing a set of underwear, and there were other people wearing all kinds of clothes. She wasn't the only one wearing underwear. Rinpoche smiled and nodded. I'll get someone to send it over. Also, my surname isn't Zhao. You can call me Zhao Prince Consort or Boss. That night, these people quarreled for 2 hours. After the Imperial Guards started to persuade them, they quickly quieted down. The next day, Rinpoche and the Imperial Guards personally escorted them to the Research Institute. After 2 nights of transition, these people roughly understood their current situation. They also maintained enough reverence for Rinpoche and kept quiet. Of course, the terrifying power of the Crow General, which seriously injured the biologist and left her on the verge of death with a gentle flap of its wings, was a sufficient deterrent. The Imperial Guard's physical persuasion was also sufficiently effective. All of these factors combined allowed these unorganized and undisciplined researchers to behave themselves. Along the way, these people would lift the curtains of the ox carriages to peek at the outside world. Everything they saw showed what kind of civilized society they were in. The various sights in Lon City made them curious, and they momentarily forgot that they had been kidnapped to another world. There were also all kinds of mounts that could be seen everywhere in Lon City, such as mountain-gazing birds and saber-toothed tigers. These strange creatures attracted most of their attention. The Research Institute was located halfway up the mountain. In between, there were 2 3-story cement buildings that covered an area of more than 1,000 square meters. These were the so-called research institutes. In addition, there were 2 rows of terraced brick houses. There were a total of 30 houses, and each house could accommodate 4 people. They had 7 or 8 acres of land, which allowed them to grow some things. Outside, there was a 2-meter-tall courtyard wall. This wasn't to prevent them from escaping, but to prevent ferocious beasts from breaking in. In addition, there were 50 winged cavalry warriors divided into 2 shifts to guard the place. It was simply a waste to arrange for 50 Kismet heaven-winged cavalry warriors in such a place. However, Rinpoche valued them so much that he didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. After arranging for everyone to be here, they sorted out their emotions, put aside other things, and immediately threw themselves into the preliminary preparations. Although Rinpoche had prepared some modern tools, they were simply not worth mentioning compared to their requirements. A large list was made and handed over to Rinpoche. Everyone, supercomputers, particle accelerators, large colliders. Are you kidding me? Face the reality, everyone. Remember that you live in a world that is 500 to 1,000 years behind Earth's technology. You need equipment that can be used immediately, that is simpler, and that can be learned from the basics. Instruments that are too complicated and delicate aren't practical. After hearing what Rinpoche said, everyone finally recognized the reality and reopened the list. Although there were still some things that made Rinpoche scratch his head, most of them were still acceptable. After asking about each piece of equipment, Rinpoche marked the order of the supplies. Chapter 926. The head of the Department of Inspection, Tai Yen, returned with more than 40 sword masters. 3 of them were at the spirit will level, and the rest were at the earth will level. However, in Rinpoche's eyes, strength was only a supplementary skill of these sword masters. Their true use was their superb learning ability. There were more than 40 people of all ages and genders. They wore coarse clothes with many pockets and looked like beggar elders. However, there were many benefits to this kind of clothing in the wilderness. Welcome everyone. Rinpoche said these words again after just a few days. He suddenly felt that all the heroes in the world had fallen into his trap. He was thinking too much. However, in some ways, Dayo did have a very high starting point. With these people, as long as they implemented universal education and cultivated talent, Rinpoche believed that Dayo would soon usher in a period of great development. Many people looked at the bald man in front of them and the dozens of guards around him and felt a little uneasy. Although they believed Du Mingyang and Ling Du's words, they still felt uneasy. Only after a few months, when they were on the right track and Rinpoche's promise began to come true, would their uneasiness gradually disappear. Rinpoche settled everyone in the city, told them about the situation, gave them various books, and asked them about the situation along the way. As Rinpoche expected, it wasn't that easy for these people to arrive. It took 2 months to gather everyone together. Du Mingyang and Ling Du explained everything, which naturally aroused some doubts. After all, the people in this organization had different purposes. Regardless of whether this matter was true or not, some people didn't want to see it happen. In the end, a chaotic battle broke out and 7 or 8 people died. Most of the remaining people followed the 2 of them to Dayo, but the others were nowhere to be found. In any case, it's good that all of you arrived safely, Rinpoche said. Then, he said with some regret, it's a pity that 7 or 8 people died. In his heart, every sword master was a treasure that could play a great role in the future. What a pity! However, his attitude warmed the hearts of the 2 of them. At least they could see that he valued them. Settle down first. I will arrange for someone to give you lessons later. Given your speed, I believe that you will soon meet my requirements. After settling them down, Rinpoche returned to Earth. There were too many things that needed to be prepared. Centrifuge, mass center of mass motion demonstrator, thermal analyzer, dynamic tester, sky balancer, incubator, spectrometer, optical instrument, reaction apparatus, physical measurement apparatus. Although some of the pipettes, funnels, flasks, and the like were made by himself, the number of instruments that needed to be brought back from Earth was not small. Moreover, many of the instruments that could be replicated had to be drawn and measured by craftsmen after they were brought back, and the data had to be saved for future use. In addition, some of the students in the academy were also sent to study diesel generators, which were intended to be used in the laboratory. Rinpoche was very considerate in setting up the research site for diesel generators in the laboratory in the mountains. When the students first saw the foreigners with red, yellow, sunken eyes, and high noses, they were shocked and thought that they were mountain spirits that had escaped from somewhere. They were exactly the same as the guards of the public. If Rinpoche hadn't spoken up in time, those scholars would have been beaten up again. Tong Lan's little fists were about to hit someone's face. She appeared in front of everyone at an extremely fast speed as if she had teleported. When she stopped, the wind created by her fists startled the scholars and made them shrink like quails. I can't hit him? He looks weird and scary. Tong Lan pouted and was a little dissatisfied. Rinpoche sneered and said, when your grandfather returns, he will spank your butt into 2 pieces. He won't hit me. Tong Lan squinted at Rinpoche and gritted her teeth. Unfortunately, the other party was Zhao Prince consort, so she couldn't hit him anymore. Ever since the trip to the 60,000 mountains, she couldn't hit him anymore. Isn't it supposed to be 2 pieces? Du Laolu said and was sent flying the next second. Remember, in the future, respect them as the teachers of the academy. Each of them is a talent who is proficient in a certain aspect. If your knowledge is 1, their knowledge is 20 or even higher, Rinpoche reminded them carefully. Rinpoche turned to look at the frightened scholars and said, don't worry. Oh my God, I thought I was going to die just now. I almost suffocated. How can such a big child have such a fast speed? His fist can bring about such a strong wind. If it hit my head, it would have been smashed like a watermelon. A middle-aged woman patted her chest and said, "Needless to say, Tong Lan's move made them understand one thing. Here, even a child could easily kill them. Moreover, the children here were very interested in taking their lives. The people here are really barbaric. After all, this is a primitive society. You can't expect it to be the same as the United States. Am I the only one who thinks that the leader, Zhao, is more terrifying?" Renbaqian listened to the rapid chatter of the foreigners with a puzzled look in his eyes. Did someone just talk about him? Fortunately, things got back on track after this small interlude. The students of the academy were studying the diesel generator. Soon, their clumsiness was unbearable to the many scholars who were watching from afar. "Oh my God, even the primary school students from our country can do better than them. They actually made a mistake with such a simple thing. They are primitive people, and you can't expect them to be at the same level as primary school students in Germany. In fact, I'm already very surprised that they can do this." At first, they were just watching from afar. Many of the mountain spirits began to gather behind the students and kept muttering. A few students were annoyed by them and turned around to glare at them. If it wasn't for Yague's reminder, they would have taught them what it meant to keep their mouths shut. It meant that they couldn't speak even if they had mouths. The scholars were shocked at first and hid far away. After discussing for a long time and realizing that they weren't beaten up, they moved closer again. Soon, the many scholars couldn't bear it anymore and began to give suggestions. A bunch of them put forward their own opinions, and the black man translated. Soon, the scholars were stunned by the clumsiness and ignorance of the students and were no longer satisfied with muttering. Two physicists with good hands-on skills began to roll up their sleeves and go into action. The others were idle and began to draw all kinds of sketches. "Look, this should be the case here. What you did was wrong. There will be an explosion." After the black man translated, Tong Lan squinted at them and muttered, "This bunch of ignorant mountain spirits." However, with the participation of these scholars, the manufacturing process of the diesel generator was indeed greatly accelerated. The technical content of this generator was actually very low, and the only limitation was the speed of the blacksmiths. 10 days later, Renbaqian finally saw the first diesel generator. Although it looked a little ugly, it could be put into use immediately. Renbaqian couldn't help but sigh. The scholars were indeed scholars. All those years of studying hadn't been in vain. Although he had always thought that those who were better at studying than him were nerds, he had to admit that these nerds did a good job. This speed also made the students of the academy rejoice and began to look up to the mountain spirits. These mountain spirits were still quite capable. Renbaqian began to intensify his efforts. While the equipment wasn't ready yet, he simply set up the research site for the diesel engine here. Chapter 927. In the 60,000 Mountains. Qi Ziding held his walking stick in his hand and sat on a protruding boulder on the mountainside with a gloomy face. He looked into the distance at the world that was engulfed by darkness. "Commander, the meat is ready." An earth wheel expert wearing animal skin brought over a 6-feet-long tail of a ferocious beast that was as thick as a thigh. This was Qi Ziding's favorite, but he just silently took it and sneered, "Those bastards are really slow." "Commander, are you talking about those bastards in the north?" the man asked with a grin. "Get lost. I can call them bastards, but you can't. If they are bastards, what are you?" Qi Ziding suddenly became furious and scolded the man until his face was covered in dirt. After that, he said, "They have been gone for half a day, right? They still haven't brought those bastards over. It seems like they haven't trained enough." The man, who had been sprayed with saliva, didn't care. The aboriginals respected the strong. Although Qi Ziding didn't receive much attention from the outside world, many people still thought of him as the protector general of the Northeast whose name shook the Yun nation. He was still an expert feared by the world. It was a pity that if he still had his legs, he would probably have a place among the top experts. It could even be said that he would have a place among the top 5. After all, he had already reached the 13th position on the list of experts. If he used his full strength, the sixth person wouldn't dare to say that he could defeat him in the future. After waiting for another 2 hours, Qi Ziding threw the tailbone in his hand to one side. He sensed that the people he had sent out had returned. Some of them had restrained their auras, giving off the feeling that they were shrouded in mist. They should be the people who had come. Qi Ziding supported himself with his walking stick and straightened his body. Although his expression was calm, there was a hint of fierceness in that calmness. This was the fierceness left behind from killing people like scything flax. The newcomers were very fast. Qi Ziding saw a group of knights riding on various mounts coming from the foot of the mountain. He also saw the figures that followed them from the darkness into the light. Except for one person, he had heard of the others for a long time. The others had also heard of his name for a long time. Ma Hongyu and the others looked up and saw the burly man standing on the mountainside with a walking stick. He had the aura of a ferocious beast that was lurking and ready to pounce on people at any time, so they immediately confirmed his identity. "Commander, I've brought him. You may leave." Qi Ziding waved his hand, his eyes never leaving the newcomer. He grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth and the smell of blood. "Although I've never seen you before, I know you. I never thought that there would be a day where I would be able to stand with you. The same goes for us," Ma Hongyu said lightly. "Don't worry. Since you've come to an agreement with my sister, I won't cause you any trouble. Do as I say next. Just don't make trouble for me," Qi Ziding said with a grin. As soon as he said that, many experts immediately frowned. Could it be that he still wanted to command them? "Then we'll do as Commander Qi says." Lin Dong spoke first and then winked at everyone. After all, they had just arrived and didn't understand anything. There was no harm in listening to Qi Ziding's words. If he really said something unacceptable to them, or if he wanted to use his status to criticize them, it wouldn't be too late for them to fall out with him. Now, the first thing they had to do was to understand the situation here. No one knew it better than these local tyrants. Lin Dong's look was complicated and ever-changing, but everyone understood it at a glance. Although these top experts rarely interacted with each other, they still had a tacit understanding when they met, just like how they had resisted Qi Zixiao's aura together. Moreover, they had traveled together for 5 months. Qi Ziding grinned and laughed, but he didn't make a sound. He turned around and walked to the back. "In that case, find a place to rest first. I'll get someone to prepare delicious food for you every day." Seeing him leave, everyone remained silent and looked for a place to rest. They were still thinking of asking about the foreign races the next day, but they didn't expect Qi Ziding to send someone to inform them the next day. In addition to Qi Ziding, there were 11 other Cardinal Heaven-level Aboriginal race experts who had been staying in the 60,000 mountains. These people were dressed in animal skins, had tattoos on their bodies, or simply had a string of white bones on their bodies. All of them looked fierce. They looked at the many experts and were quite curious. These people had been staying in the depths of the 60,000 mountains and had little contact with the outside world. Therefore, they didn't have much hatred for outsiders, especially since both sides had already confirmed their cooperation. They were more curious. "At present, we have discovered a foreign race with a human head and a snake body. They should be called the Serpent Race and live on an island in the middle of a lake outside the 5 mountains. They are very sharp, and we will definitely be discovered if we approach them," Qi Ziding said faintly. He knew the purpose of these people. Although he had given them a show of strength yesterday, he wasn't careless when it came to what needed to be done. However, he omitted something when he introduced them. They didn't approach them not only because they would be discovered, but also because there weren't many Aboriginals who knew how to swim. If they were to fight with the foreign races there, they would probably suffer a great loss. "How are you going to deal with them?" Su Gongso asked. "Is there a need to ask? Since they are all enemies, we have to kill them all to prevent any leaks. Of course, we have to leave a few alive to see if we can get any information out of them." Qi Ziding sneered, full of killing intent. Although the experts felt that something was wrong, they didn't say anything. After all, according to Ren Baqian, these foreign races were all enemies. If they were to attack them and let them escape, there might be big trouble in the future. This involved the entire human race, and they couldn't take any risks. We want to check out the situation first so that we can be prepared, Lin Dong said after some thought. Although Lin Dong was the leader of an evil cult, he was much better at dealing with people than others. Even Qi Ziding, who was prejudiced against them, couldn't find anything wrong with his words. Qi Ziding quickly arranged for someone to take them there. Although it was said that a horse would die from running up a mountain, the 5 mountains were only half a day's journey for these experts. After crossing the 5th mountain, everyone saw a vast expanse of blue in front of them. In the middle of this blue was a sizable island. Be careful not to be discovered by them. The person leading the way was an Aboriginal expert with a horn on his nose. His tone was rather strange and his pronunciation wasn't very accurate. Let me give you this. The Aboriginal expert took out a pair of binoculars from his chest pocket and asked with a flaunting expression, "Do you know how to use this thing?" "What is this?" Everyone had never seen such a thing before. Seeing everyone's reaction, the Aboriginal expert laughed happily and said, "It's a clairvoyant. With this, you can see the scene thousands of kilometers away. From here, you can see the situation on the island. Be careful, this is my treasure. Don't break it." Everyone suddenly felt uncomfortable. When did it become their turn to be looked down upon by the barbarians? Lin Dong carefully took the binoculars. Being able to see the scene thousands of kilometers away was indeed a treasure for scouting purposes. Chapter 9:28. After using the binoculars to observe the situation in the distance, the experts immediately discovered the significance of the object in their hands. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a treasure. It was made of 2 pieces of polished crystal, and there were no impurities in front of them. More importantly, the function of this thing was that it could zoom in and magnify distant objects by dozens of times. Originally, they could only see things that were dozens of kilometers away, but with this object, they could see dozens of times further. Objects that were thousands of kilometers away could even be seen clearly in detail through this object, and the distance could be adjusted by rotating the lens in front of them. The legendary clairvoyance was nothing more than this. Many experts saw a series of buildings built along the lake on the island. They were very different from human houses and looked like shacks that were casually put up. They looked simpler and more chaotic. The most important thing was that there were some creatures with human bodies and snake tails active on the island. Most of them were females, and there were very few males. They are indeed the human-like creatures that Zhao Prince Consort mentioned. They are called the Nagas, right? They have human bodies and snake tails, and we have seen 191 of them so far. Judging from their living conditions, they are still relatively primitive. However, there is a statue in the center of the island, which should be the god they worship. Ma Hongyu looked at it for a while before passing the binoculars to the next person. Judging from the number of shacks, there should be about 300 foreign races on the island. They feed on fish and birds, and the weakest among them is at least at the earth-will level. In addition, their buildings seem to have exits underwater. Su Gongso had a grave expression on his face. If the weakest among them was at the earth-will level, then how strong would their experts be? One had to know that the ordinary aboriginals were only at the man-will level, and these foreign races were much stronger than the aboriginals. Furthermore, there were exits underwater, which meant that it would be very difficult to eliminate all of them. If the other party wanted to escape, it would be very difficult to stop them. The only reassuring thing was that there weren't many of them. However, this was the only place. One had to know that there were still many foreign races outside the mountains, which were the real enemies of the human race. That statue isn't their god. It should be a hero or a king or something like that. Usually, in order to enhance the image of the god, the statue of a god will have some different parts. This will create a sense of the unknown, which is beneficial for the believers to revere. This is especially true for these relatively primitive foreign races. Lin Dong was more concerned about the statue in the center of the island and made his own analysis. After putting down the binoculars, he smiled at everyone and said, "It's a personal habit. Please forgive me." Righteous sect was able to become the #1 evil sect in Great Xia by relying on the hard work and professional knowledge of every generation's sect master. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched. I know you're the sect master of the righteous sect, so you don't need to emphasize it again. I'm curious about one thing. How do these creatures reproduce? Gao Yi asked after a while. Everyone immediately looked over. They really couldn't tell that the thick-browed and big-eyed Gao Yi was actually this kind of person. I'm just curious. If we know how they reproduce, it'll be easier to understand their fertility. Gao Yi was a little embarrassed when he saw everyone's expressions. He found an impeccable excuse for himself. Their tails can be opened and closed, allowing them to extend their genitals, the ancient race expert explained to everyone. This time, everyone looked at him with a strange expression. Gao Yi was just saying it and you actually researched it? The Aboriginal expert was very calm and said, their mating is quite interesting. You can watch it tonight. They will be mating by the lake. Everyone stared at him for a long time and couldn't help but think to themselves, these barbarians have no sense of propriety. Things that can't be said in Great Xia are as normal as the movement of the stars in their eyes. In the eyes of the people of Great Xia, this kind of thing could only be understood and not explained, even though Great Xia's culture and industry were thousands of times better than Dayo's, and even the scholars talked about romantic affairs. In their opinion, the only normal person in Dayo who could communicate with them was probably Rinpoche. However, if they knew that Rinpoche was preparing to print a large number of erotic pictures and pornography to increase the reproduction ability of the Aboriginals, this idea would probably change. Everyone checked the mountain for a long time and confirmed Rinpoche's words. All that was left to do was to defeat these foreign races and confirm their confessions. After that, everyone returned to where the Aboriginals were and decided when and how to attack. There were more than 500 Aboriginals here, including 12 Cardinal Heaven experts, which was considered a considerable combat power. In addition, there were also 500 Kismet Heaven experts. Coupled with those strangely shaped mounts, the combat power of these people could be increased by 30%, which was just enough to deal with the commoners of the foreign races. What they were concerned about were the experts of the foreign races. The island wasn't too big. It was about 10 kilometers long and only 3 or 4 kilometers wide. There was a row of shacks on the southern side of the lake. In the center of the island was a statue that was dozens of meters tall. Below the statue was a pedestal and a flight of steps. In front of the statue, many fish were placed as tributes. Every day at sunset, the people of the Negu race on the island would offer food in front of the statue, pray for blessings, and then enjoy the day's harvest. The huge size of the lake and the abundance of aquatic products made the Negu race not worry about a lack of food. After enjoying the food, many of the commoners of the Negu race would mate at the edge of the lake. The Negu race didn't know that they were being watched. The few binoculars that were left behind played a great role at this time. The next night, dozens of figures with amazing auras descended from the sky, and several of them went straight for the statue in the center of the island. Which race are you friends from? A woman's voice was immediately heard from a shack at the edge of the island. More than a dozen spirit wheel experts from the foreign races immediately went to meet the people in the sky. However, when they realized that someone was going straight for the statue in the center of the island, these Negu people were shocked and angry. What are you doing? Boom. The huge statue in the center of the island was hit by a few figures and was immediately covered in cracks. Protect the statue. Many Negu people rushed out of the shacks and frantically rushed to the center of the island. Just right. Lin Dong said softly as he looked at the cracked statue in the center of the island. This was his suggestion. Usually, this kind of totemic statue was an extremely important object. If they destroyed it immediately, the other party would go crazy. However, after the craziness subsided, they would probably flee when they realized that they were no match for them. Therefore, they had to make sure that the statue was damaged but not destroyed so that the foreign races would frantically come to protect the statue. This was the only way to eliminate all the foreign races on the island. At the same time, many Aboriginals who were already prepared at the periphery of the lake threw huge logs that they had cut down into the lake to use as stepping stones. At this moment, an extremely astonishing aura rose from the edge of the lake. Humans, you really are the root of all trouble. It's just as Zhao Prince Consort said. With an angry roar, a six-armed figure with boundless power slammed into a human expert at the edge of the island. The two sides only exchanged a single blow before they separated. Gao Yi was sent flying with a look of horror, and the short spear in his hand also flew out. Only a long spear was left in his hand, and blood kept flowing out of the webbing between his thumb and index finger. What kind of demon dares to be so arrogant? A massive palm that was dozens of feet wide slammed down, and the sun, moon, and stars in the palm flickered with white light. Before the palm landed, it had already shot out. This was Su Gongso's extremely powerful move, and if he encountered other experts, these sun, moon, and stars would be enough to make them flustered and unable to deal with the palm above their heads. However, the six-armed figure held 4 steel sabers and slashed at the sky. The sun, moon, and stars all disappeared, and a hole was directly pierced through the giant palm. Fire! Spear! Ma Hongyu's brush danced in the air. Countless flaming spears appeared in the air and shot towards the back of the expert from the ancient clan. Stone! Sharp stone pillars protruded from the ground, sealing off the other party's range of movement. Su Gongso only had time to shout, "Be careful, this person is powerful." Flames, spears, and stone pillars all shattered. This is a tough nut to crack. This foreign race is actually so powerful. Gluttonous Duke gritted his teeth and untied a bag from his waist. He reached out and took out a pig's shoulder and threw it at the other party. Next was 8 treasures rice, 12th moon porridge, roast chicken, beef leg, and grilled fish. Almost every dish was delicious. Chapter 929. There was a rumor in Jianghu that anyone who fought with gluttonous bus would complain about it. That seemingly endless bag contained countless delicacies. When it attacked, not only could it use all kinds of methods, it could also bring with it a tempting aroma. Even if it was full, it would still arouse the gluttony in its stomach. Many of the great Xia experts used their methods, but the experts of the serpent race dashed left and right, causing their attacks to dissipate. Many aboriginal earth wheel experts crossed the lake one after another. First, they smashed the shacks and captured the old and young people who stayed behind to prevent them from escaping. The rest of the people surrounded the foreign race experts who had rushed to the center of the island. The human experts entangled with the experts of the serpent race. Other than facing the strongest expert of the serpent race, they weren't at a disadvantage in other aspects. The battle cries from both sides shook the sky. At this moment, Renbaqian was faced with a strange silence amidst the warmth of the warmth. This matter originated from the last few times he came back. Firstly, Renbaqian's parents hadn't heard the news of the Empress's pregnancy. Secondly, they hadn't seen her since they got married. Although it had only been a year in Deyo, almost 3 years had passed on Earth. Renbaqian couldn't refuse and could only bring the Empress back to his hometown in the northeast. Now that the Empress was close to 12 months pregnant, her abdomen was still slightly bulging. If she wore an inner garment and a veil, it would be almost invisible. In addition to his parents, Ren Wanyan and his wife, Su Hongxiu, were also there. She had a delicate appearance, gave off a very clean feeling, and had a gentle personality. She was very enthusiastic when she saw them. Other than the occasional sound of acknowledgement, the Empress rarely spoke and had a cold expression. Other than when she was with Renbaqian, she had this expression most of the time. It gave off the impression of arrogance, which was actually arrogance. Such a reaction made Su Hongxiu feel a little overwhelmed. She's always like this. Don't mind her. Renbaqian chuckled, making Su Hongxiu feel flattered. Although Ren Wanyan was the boss of the most anticipated technology company on Earth, she also knew whose words carried more weight in this family. Furthermore, Renbaqian didn't look like a good person, and his aura was much more powerful than Ren Wanyan's. When she looked at him, she didn't feel like she was looking at an invisible tycoon, but rather a high-ranking official. Zixiao, you keep rubbing your belly. Are you pregnant? Mama Ren asked fervently when she saw the Empress touching her belly occasionally. Her eyes were glowing. The Empress thought for a while, turned her head, and saw that Rinpochen and Rinwanyan had already gone to the side to talk. After thinking for a while, she nodded her head. Mama Ren was immediately overjoyed. After looking forward to it for so long, it was finally here. This eldest daughter-in-law was not like the youngest daughter-in-law, who could speak freely. Just looking at her made her feel a little breathless. This time, he had invited her to his house for a meal. He had made up his mind to ask her a few questions. Joyous occasion, truly joyous occasion. How long has it been? Mama Ren asked excitedly. 11 months and 17 days. Mother Ren, Su Hongxiu, 11 months and 17 days? Mama Ren repeated. Wasn't she supposed to be pregnant for 10 months? Could it be that his 2 sons were fake? 11 months and 17 days. The Empress said with certainty. Did you go to the hospital for a checkup? Mama Ren felt that she might have misunderstood something and changed the way she asked. I know my body very well, the Water Empress said calmly. Mother Ren, Su Hongxiu. Mama Ren decided to ask her son what was going on later. It was also thanks to this decision that she made. If she continued to ask and found out that the Empress's stomach was a ball, she would probably suspect that there was something wrong with the Empress's brain or her own. Not long after, seeing that Rinpochen was still talking, Mama Ren couldn't help but ask again. Is she pregnant? The Empress glanced at her, thought for a while and replied, yes. Is it 4 months and 17 days? 11 months and 17 days. Mama Ren, it was better to ask her son later. After Rinpochen finished talking with his younger brother, he saw his mother coming over with a strange look on her face. What's wrong with your wife? Rinpochen was baffled. Do you know that she is pregnant? Mama Ren asked. Rinpochen's heart skipped a beat. He laughed dryly and asked, what did she say? I asked her if she was pregnant, and she said 11 months and 17 days. I even checked again and again to see if it was 4 months and 17 days, but she said it was 11 months. I have never heard of anyone not giving birth after being pregnant for so long. Her stomach doesn't look like it either. Do you want to take her to the hospital for a checkup? Mom, your northeastern accent is too heavy. She heard it as preparing for pregnancy. She has been preparing for pregnancy for 11 months and 17 days. You know that people have to prepare for pregnancy before they get pregnant. That's impossible. My Mandarin is famous for being accurate. Those who don't know would think that I'm from a television station. Mama Rin stared at her. What else do you think is going on? You said that she heard wrongly. Rinpochen spread his hands. Mama Rin thought about it suspiciously and asked with difficulty, 11 months and 17 days of preparation? That's quite a long time. Why aren't you pregnant yet? Do you want to go to the hospital for a checkup? Rinpochen's face turned black, and he cursed in his heart. However, he still explained seriously, I have checked, and there's no problem. Just wait for your grandchildren. Hongxiu has been pregnant for 3 months. You two have to hurry up. Your father and I are only looking forward to it now. Rinpochen had a headache and quickly nodded. Not long after, Rinpochen sat beside the Empress and smiled bitterly. What's wrong with your expression? Is it because of the ball in my stomach? The Empress said faintly. Her voice was directly transmitted to Rinpochen's ears, but no one else noticed. Your Majesty also knows about it. Being pregnant for more than 11 months is already a big problem for ordinary people, not to mention that your Majesty still hasn't given birth. This is too shocking for them. I disdain lying, the Empress said faintly. Rinpochen wasn't surprised. If you speak like an ordinary person and care about others, you wouldn't be my Empress. Upon hearing this answer, the Empress smiled. After staying at home for 2 days, they got along well. Although the Empress was cold, the only new family member, Su Hongxiu, was already used to it. Instead, she often shared her maintenance tips with the Empress and expressed surprise from time to time about how the Empress's skin was so tender and smooth. A few days later, Rinpochen and the Empress returned to Wuji City with some laboratory equipment. When they returned to Dayo, they heard the news that Chi Ziding had led many Aboriginal experts and Great Xia experts to launch a surprise attack on the Nega race. One of the Great Xia experts was killed. It was Taoist Bai Yun, who was ranked 16th in the world and blocked the escape route of the enemy experts. At the same time, 11 people were seriously injured. 2 Aboriginal Cardinal Heaven experts were killed, and all of them were seriously injured. It could be said that the casualties were heavy. More than 30 Aboriginal Kismet Heaven experts were killed, and nearly 100 were injured. The 300 foreign races were either killed or captured. None of them managed to escape. It could be said that in this night attack, everyone first attacked the statue that the other party valued the most, delayed the other party's hands and feet, and suffered heavy losses even though they had the majority of experts and were surrounded by the Aboriginals. Ma Hongyu, Su Gongso, Lin Dong, Fire Snake Tao Qian, and the others were seriously injured. The most important thing was that the other party had an expert who surpassed the spirit wheel level. If it weren't for Taoist Bai Yun's desperate efforts to hold him back and the other party's hesitation to retreat, this biggest enemy would probably have escaped. However, this was only a village of 300 foreign races. Chapter 930. This was the second time they had confronted the foreign races. The first time was when Rinpoche and the Empress used nuclear annihilation in the 60,000 mountains to wipe out a few herdsmen. But this time, although the human martial artists suffered fewer casualties than the foreign races, it was a complete and utter defeat, which made everyone who participated sober up. The foreign races were very strong. This was the case even when the human side had the absolute advantage. If the two sides were to face each other head-on, the casualties would be even greater. The Empress ordered with a gloomy face, "Withdraw everyone." Rinpoche's eyes flickered, but he didn't say anything. Although this path had to be opened, it wasn't the right time yet. Unless Li Fu was sent to restrain the foreign experts, but Li Fu was still useful at the moment. After all, Rinpoche was still waiting for Li Fu to be the scapegoat. If Su Wuming suddenly came, it would be too risky since he was a super expert from 100 years ago and the Empress was pregnant. Whether it was the Empress or the ball in her stomach, he couldn't accept any problems. Even if it was a ball, it was the ball that he and the Empress gave birth to. Putting the matter of the ball aside, Rinpoche had to prepare something to open up the path after everyone had recuperated. Putting the nuclear bomb aside, the effects of nuclear radiation hadn't yet manifested. The situation in the 60,000 mountains was complicated, and it was easy for unexpected situations to occur. He still needed to observe for a period of time. Rinpoche was very interested in sonic weapons and weather weapons. Manipulating the weather to attack from thousands of kilometers away was like using technology to achieve the magic of the immortals in novels. Although the ancient race Kismet Heaven warriors had been valiant in the face of the foreign races, the casualties they had suffered had been heart-wrenching. Originally, Rinpoche wasn't going to develop gunpowder weapons. After all, with such weapons, the role of an individual's ability would be greatly reduced. 10 to 10 years was still manageable, but after a few decades, gunpowder weapons would spread to other countries sooner or later. At that time, the Aboriginals would be at a disadvantage. However, the situation had changed at this time. The casualties of the Kismet Heaven Aboriginal warriors made him feel a little distressed. More than 30 people had died and 100 were seriously injured in just a village of 300 people. It was necessary to use more advanced weapons to enhance their combat capabilities. In Rinpoche's mind, this kind of weapon was similar to the Gatling gun. It could cover the sky and drown the enemy with a rain of bullets. As long as there were enough of them, they could even pose a threat to a Cardinal Heaven expert. As for the weight of the machine guns and ammunition boxes, the Aboriginals didn't need to worry about this. Not long after the Empress gave the order, Li Yuanzhu met up with everyone who had returned. In fact, even before she arrived, she already knew about the heavy casualties. In her heart, she was secretly shocked by the combat power of those foreign races. This time, when she met up with everyone, she also saw a few captives brought back by everyone. There was a spirit wheel expert and a few earth wheel experts from the Nega race. After seeing these foreign races and this battle, these experts no longer had any doubts. Along the way, they were seriously considering Rinpoche's method of killing people. Based on the current situation, the human race might not be able to win even if they gathered all their forces to fight against the strange races. If they split their forces, it would be suicide. Of course, there was another option, which was to give up crossing the barrier of the 60,000 mountains. However, this option was not within everyone's range of options. It had to be said that his nuclear bomb gave them great confidence. With such a destructive weapon in hand, the humans might be able to win this battle. Otherwise, it was hard to say how they would choose. Just like Li Fu and Su Wuming back then. However, at this time, Rinpoche had already shifted his gaze to other weapons. 5 months later, the Empress was 16.5 months pregnant. She still hadn't given birth, but her belly was a little bigger. Now, even if she covered it with clothes, some traces could still be seen. This made Rinpoche more and more focused on figuring out what was inside the ball in the Empress's belly. In any case, it wasn't Pikachu. During this period, Rinpoche went back to the Messier 87 department to learn about the weather weapon. After asking for instructions, this information wasn't kept secret from him. The domestic weather weapon was still being developed. Although there were some results, it was still some distance from actual combat. At present, the main directions included sound waves, typhoons, tornadoes, earthquakes, hail, and rapid cooling. In fact, this was also the main direction of research in various countries. If the research went smoothly, Rinpoche would be able to see results in another 5 to 10 years. Dayo had only been in existence for a little more than 3 years. However, the current results were some large equipment that Rinpoche couldn't bring back to Dayo with his strength of more than 1,000 kilograms. It would take longer for them to be miniaturized. In any case, Rinpoche finally had a clear idea of what was going on. In addition, the diesel engine had also been developed, and the scholars from Earth had played a great role. There were now 23 scholars, including several physicists, chemists, mathematicians, 2 botanists, 2 zoologists, as well as medical and material experts. Recently, they were applying to Rinpoche for the participation of some aboriginals in scientific experiments. In other words, they were participating in the work of the research. With the completion of the diesel engine research, Rinpoche was now letting many aboriginal craftsmen make the first tractor by hand. With the participation of many scholars, they were striving to develop a production line that could be mass-produced after the tractor was successfully made. In addition, many other changes had taken place. The first road from Lon City to the Yun Nation had been completely built. Previously, it would take 20 days to get there with goods. Now, it would only take 9 to 10 days to get there. Most of the original prisoners of war were now invested in the construction of the road from Lon City to the Protectorate of the Southeast. A small number of them were used to build the various infrastructure of the new city, including sewers, drainage channels, power lines, and water pipes. In addition, there were dozens of villages in the 60,000 mountains. Nearly 30,000 people came out of the mountains and trekked all the way to the edge of the new city to settle down. The Ministry of Revenue supported them to isolate the waters along the river to breed the strange fish and parasites on them. The resources in Lon City were getting richer and richer, and the entire city was several times more lively than before the war broke out. The number of Aboriginals and Jing tribe people was also several times more than before. As the price of ironware dropped to 1/10 of its original price, the number of Aboriginals carrying swords and sabers on the streets increased, and public security deteriorated. Fortunately, the 8 arenas in and outside Lon City reversed the deteriorating public security situation. At this time, Rinpoche was sitting in the largest arena in the city. On the stage below stood a flaunting young girl in an animal skin tube top and an apron. 10 consecutive victories, 10 consecutive victories. This is Zhu Hua's 10th consecutive victory this week. Is there anyone who wants to challenge her? Are there any warriors who want to challenge her? The current prize money is 300 taels of silver. Rinpoche listened to the repeated shouts in the arena and frowned as he looked at Zhu Hua below. Zhu Hua's brain wasn't very good. According to her own words, she was at most 9 points. However, her recent results were even worse. Her score had dropped from 9 points to 3 points. Furthermore, he couldn't see her in the steam engine improvement research room anymore. Instead, she had placed all her attention on the arena. At present, with her strength, she was considered pretty good among the Kismet Heaven-level aboriginals and could win a sum of money in a short period of time. However, she couldn't continue like this. However, the academy might not be suitable for her. She had also recognized this point and had recently placed her attention elsewhere. Perhaps he should recommend her to the Ministry of War. Renbachian thought for a long time and watched another of Zhu Hua's matches. His frown gradually eased up. At this time, Renbachian was holding a book in his hand, which attracted the attention of the people beside him. The main reason was that the cover of the book was made up of high-definition photos of various lolas, prostitutes, and young married women. Chapter 931. Renbachian was writing a formula on the blackboard when he suddenly sensed something. He turned around and left the classroom to look in the direction of the palace. He could feel an aura full of anger and murderous intent coming from the palace. He was very familiar with this aura. It was the Empress. However, she hadn't been this angry in a long time. Even in the academy, he could feel it. That aura was like a collapsing Mount Bujo that could crash down at any time and crush the people below into minced meat. This class will be a self-study session. Renbachian turned his head and instructed the students who were looking in the direction of the palace from the window. Then he dashed straight for the palace. Have I been too kind to them? Do they think that I'm weak when I'm kind to them? Is there anything that they don't dare to do or can't do? Send an order to Zidonglai to kill everyone in the Yun nation who is above the earth wheel level. Kill all the sects. I want to hang their heads on top of the city walls of Wangjing so that they will remember it forever. The Empress sat in the seat of honor with her black hair swaying behind her. Her face was ashen, and her eyes were overflowing with murderous intent. Qin Chuan, take my winged cavalry and immediately head for the Yun nation. Remember my words. Leave no one alive. Yes, Your Majesty. I will take my men there now. Qin Chuan cupped his fists. Tai Yen, take the Department of Inspection with you. Those sects are like bugs in the gutter. You have to find all of them. If you can't do it, use your head instead. Everyone in the hall wore a solemn expression. In the face of this furious empress, no one dared to speak at this time. Moreover, the anger in everyone's hearts was difficult to quell. Even if the empress didn't give the order, they would still ask for it. Renbachian stood at the entrance of the hall with an uncertain look on his face. In fact, the empress saw him when he arrived, but she ignored him and didn't even let him enter the hall. Instead, she directly gave the order. It could be seen that the empress's anger and desire to kill couldn't be stopped. What happened? Why is Her Majesty so angry? Renbachian looked uncertain for a long time as he whispered to the imperial guards in front of the palace hall. Your Highness, Vice Protector General Wu Kai was surrounded and killed. His corpse was split into 5 parts, and his head was shot by an arrow into the walls of Pingdu. 10 100-man patrol teams were ambushed, and all of them died in battle. Commandant Peng Yu and Commandant Li Rui had died in battle. From the 2 commandants to the patrol team, everyone had died without a complete corpse. They had been dismembered after their deaths. Separate the corpses from the heads and pile them up like a tower at the scene. The guard who answered had a fiery look in his eyes. When Renbachian heard this news, his heart skipped a beat, and his facial expression changed immediately. It's over, something big is going to happen. Wu Kai was the Deputy Protector General of the Protectorate of the Northeast, while Commandant Peng Yu and Li Rui were Cardinal Heaven experts. The 3 of them had actually died in battle, and their corpses weren't even intact. There were also 10 100-man patrol teams. Even if these people died in battle, the Empress would still be angry, but she wouldn't be so angry that she would issue an order to kill all the practitioners at the Earthwheel level and all the sections. Not only did the other party attack and kill these people, but they also dismembered their corpses and piled them up like a tower at the scene. This wasn't just audacious, not to mention throwing Wu Kai's head to Pingdu. Pingdu was originally called Qingping City, and it was now the location of the Protectorate of the Northeast and the center of Dayo's rule in the entire Yun nation. One could imagine that the entire Protectorate of the Northeast, from top to bottom, had already begun to sharpen their weapons and were just waiting for the Empress to give the order. At this moment, the Empress had already given the order. One could imagine the uproar and hatred that would be stirred up in this world once they started to take action. Rinpoche stood in place and thought for a long time as he listened to the Empress issuing orders in the hall, including sealing the border between the Yun nation and Great Xia and mobilizing the Protectorate of the North. Almost all of these were targeted at the Yun nation so that the practitioners there had nowhere to escape. Your Majesty, those Great Xia experts who went to the 60,000 mountains are on their way back and will arrive in 2 days. If they find out, someone said. So what if they find out? This is a matter within Dayo's borders. Since they can do it, I won't be lenient and will let them experience my thunderous fury. Kill until no one dares to cause trouble, kill until no one can cause trouble, kill until they are terrified, kill until it is too late for them to regret. The Empress said coldly. She had killed 4 people in a row, and her killing intent was soaring. When the court session ended and everyone filed out, they only cupped their fists and greeted Rinpoche. If the Dayo Imperial Court was divided into the left and the right, then Rinpoche was the only one on the left. Politics? No, the Aboriginals only played with knives. When the Empress came out of the hall, Rinpoche naturally followed behind her. Don't try to persuade me, the Empress said directly. They are too bold and have gone overboard. I can't forgive them. Your Majesty, you still have a child in your belly. Don't be so angry. I naturally won't persuade you. I also want to tear them into pieces, but won't this implicate too many people? Rinpoche tried to make his voice calmer and tried to appease the Empress. Implicate too many people? Do you know how many people are involved this time? 10 100-man teams, 2 commandants, and Wu Kai. Humph. If it weren't for such a big incident, I wouldn't have known that so many people were secretly colluding together. The Empress snorted, and her murderous aura didn't diminish in the slightest. 34 spirit wheel experts and 3,000 earth wheel experts. They really did a good job. So many people were able to link up such a thing right under my nose. The more the Empress spoke, the more furious she became. The stone bricks that were laid on the ground exploded behind her as she walked. Rinpoche's eyebrows twitched. 3,000 earth wheel experts. There were probably only so many earth wheel experts in the entire Yun nation. Everyone was involved? How was that possible? Thousands of earth wheel experts were so determined that they didn't care about their lives and families? Even if they could really make all the experts participate, how could he not have received any information? There was probably something wrong with this. Your Majesty, are you trying to say that there's something wrong with this? The Empress interrupted him coldly. I don't care whether there's a problem or not, how much of the 3,000 earthwheel experts are not up to standard, and whether there are 1,000 or 500 of them. In short, a large number of experts from the Yun nation are involved in this matter, so I have no reason to let them off. As for those who didn't participate, they are unlucky. Besides, they might not be wrongly accused. At least one of them won't be able to escape without reporting. Rinpoche sighed. Although the Empress usually didn't show it in front of him, she understood everything. It was just that she was too arrogant to say a lot of things. This time, she just wanted to vent her anger. Your Majesty, I want to go with Sir Qin, Rinpoche said after some thought. The Empress stopped in her tracks and asked, do you still want to use the same method as in Tianjing Basin? Divide a group, pull a group, and beat up a group? This isn't what I want. After thinking about it, the anger on the Empress's face eased a little. She sighed softly and said, forget it, I can let you go, but I have a request. Everyone who participated and knows about this must be killed. Chapter 932. Why didn't I know about such an important matter? Rinpoche put his hands on his knees and looked at the 2 men in front of him calmly. Your Highness, Her Majesty's news came directly from the Protectorate of the Northeast, and we had to wait 1.5 days for the messenger bird to arrive. one of the men said with an aggrieved look. Directly from the Protectorate of the Northeast? What are you responsible for? What are you doing? Why wasn't there any news of such an important matter? Didn't you notice any clues? What's the use of you people then? Are you useless? Rinpoche's voice became calmer, and his face remained calm. However, his words were merciless, and the sweat on the heads of the two men increased. Please calm down, Your Highness. We didn't do our job well. Please give us another chance. We will definitely get to the bottom of this matter. The two of them didn't dare to argue anymore and said, Calm down? Her Majesty is angry. What can I do to appease her? Rinpoche snorted and looked at the two men gloomily. We didn't do our job well. Rinpoche sat in the seat of honor and looked down at the two men for a long time before saying, Investigate. Every bit of information, every trace of it, had to be thoroughly investigated. Don't let go of even the slightest bit. There won't be a next time. Rinpoche rubbed his eyebrows after the two men left. This matter didn't only concern the Yun Nation, but also the integration of the Aboriginals and other races. Even the Jing tribe was included. After all, the Jing tribe was also considered an outsider to the Aboriginals. It had only been 4 years since they came to Lan City in broad daylight. Although this matter concerned the Jing tribe, Rinpoche didn't say it out loud. He didn't want others to think that the Jing tribe and the Aboriginals were separated. In fact, he couldn't let them have such thoughts. Even the people of the Jing tribe couldn't integrate with the Aboriginals. Other people could feel this way, but he couldn't let these words come out of his mouth. As a superior, he had to pay attention to every word and action. With the Empress's anger, the violent machine of Dayo immediately started to operate. Except for 500 of the 2,000 winged cavalry warriors who stayed behind in Lan City, the rest followed Qin River to the Yun Nation under the Empress's orders. As for the Protectorate of the North, Hongwu also dispatched 10,000 soldiers and their experts. Rinpoche didn't set off with Qin Chuan. Instead, he continued to stay in Lan City. On one hand, he had to arrange some matters, including the academy, various research institutes, the Department of Commerce, and even the Protectorate. Most importantly, he was still waiting for the many experts who had returned from the 60,000 mountains. If he wasn't here and those experts heard about this when they returned, there might be some trouble. After all, those experts definitely wouldn't just stand by and watch. The Yun Nation had always been a part of Great Xia, and the ancestors of the people of the Yun Nation were also from Great Xia. It was difficult to separate the two sides. Since Dayo had conquered the Yun Nation, they couldn't say anything based on their status. However, if Dayo wanted to start a massacre in the Yun Nation, many people would definitely oppose it. Given the Empress's current situation, she couldn't tolerate any disobedience. In such a situation, he could only mediate by himself. Besides, he had an idea. Was this really done by the people of the Yun Nation? All the experts in the Yun Nation had given up their lives? How could this be? There must be a problem somewhere. Previously, Su Xianxian was poisoned and Luohua sect was exterminated. What was their purpose? Were they targeting Luohua sect or Dayo? Although there was no evidence, Rinpoche felt that there was an invisible connection between these two incidents. This was because the consequences of these two incidents were to provoke the relationship between Dayo, Great Xia, and the practitioners of the Yun Nation. In particular, if this incident wasn't handled well, the entire Yun Nation would be in turmoil. The Aboriginals would also be isolated and hated by the practitioners of other countries. It would be extremely difficult for the homecoming organization to achieve its original goal of absorbing all the experts of the human race. Rinpoche suspected that the foreign races had spies among the human race. After waiting in Lan City for 4 days, Rinpoche finally saw everyone return. Beside him were Lin Yu, who was holding melon seeds, and Lin Xiaola, who was holding a lollipop in her mouth. Rinpoche didn't know what she was thinking. After eating melon seeds in Lan City for 10 months, she wandered around the city in high spirits every day. She even bought 2 Jinping Mei books, one for herself to read, and the other for her collection. As for Lin Xiaola, Rinpoche felt that he couldn't let her continue to eat, sleep, and eat. It just so happened that he was going to the Yun Nation and needed to bring 2 experts with him, so he pulled her out of this cycle. After that, Lin Xiaola and Lin Yu got into a fight and became very close after that. As for the reason for the fight, Lin Xiaola felt that milk candy was the most delicious, while Lin Yu felt that melon seeds were the most delicious. Just like how Rinpoche didn't understand why the 2 of them fought over this matter, he also didn't understand how these 2 stupid girls could eat from the same bowl in just 2 days. Lin Yu's wooden food bowl was always carried with her and never let anyone touch it. However, there was something that Rinpoche wanted to tell Lin Yu several times, but he didn't know if he should say it. He had never seen Lin Xiaola wash that bowl. The 3 of them waited for an hour at the top of the city wall, and finally, the experts returned. Unlike when they set off with full confidence, the people who returned weren't dejected, but they weren't in high spirits either. It could be imagined that more than a dozen top experts besieged one person, only to end up seriously injured, and one of them even died. If the other party hadn't missed the opportunity and couldn't escape, these experts would have been too ashamed to face anyone. In addition to the many experts who returned, there were also 2 carriages that were covered with cloth, and the Negu people were locked inside. "Everyone, it's been hard on you all this time." Rinpoche greeted them with a smile. "It's nothing." Everyone waved their hands and said with an ugly expression, "This time, we finally know that we are still frogs in the well. Everyone, let's go back to the city and rest first. Her Majesty has prepared a banquet for everyone." Rinpoche led everyone back to the city. This wasn't the time to talk yet. Before they reached Beihong district, someone said, "The atmosphere in the city seems a little off. The way the commoners look at us is also different from the last time. Did something big happen?" He had to admit that these experts were really sharp enough to be able to detect a slight change in the atmosphere in the city so quickly after 10 months. Something happened in the Yun Nation. 34 spirit wheel experts and thousands of earth wheel experts surrounded and killed the Deputy Protector General of the Protectorate of the Northeast, as well as 2 lieutenant generals and 10 100-man patrol teams. They even dismembered the corpses into pieces and piled them up. How is that possible? Everyone was surprised to hear this news. There were only a few thousand earth wheel experts in the entire Yun Nation. Thousands of earth wheel experts participated in the siege. Furthermore, they used such a cruel method. Their reaction was the same as Rinpoche's. It was impossible. Rinpoche frowned and said, "If I wasn't waiting for you, I would have set off long ago. The impact of this matter is too great. Her Majesty is also furious, and blood will flow like a river. We must find out who is behind this so that it doesn't lead to a disaster." Cheesy Xiao. Everyone sensed something unusual from Rinpoche's words. This matter is Dayo's internal affairs. Not only is Her Majesty furious, but I am also furious. I am going to the Yun Nation this time to give those who didn't participate in this matter one last chance. As for whether they can grasp this opportunity, it will depend on themselves. Everyone frowned. Rinpoche immediately said that this matter was Dayo's internal affairs and that he was telling them about it. It couldn't be without reason. Everyone understood what he meant. Let's talk about this with the old beggar later. The old beggar has 2 acquaintances in that area. They can help us ask if there's any misunderstanding or if someone is playing tricks on us. It's impossible for all the practitioners of the Yun Nation to be involved in this matter. Gluttonous Duke said with a frown. I have a junior who is staying in the Yun Nation. I can also write a letter and have Zhao Prince Consort deliver it to him, Gao Yi said straightforwardly. If he wanted to kill all the practitioners of the Yun Nation, these people would naturally oppose it. Since Rinpoche had the intention to investigate this matter, it meant that there was still a chance to turn things around. At the very least, there wouldn't be too many innocent people, and everyone was willing to help him. I have nothing to do right now, so I will go with you. You won't be unwelcoming, right? Li Yuanzhu nodded at Rinpoche. Not only Rinpoche, but she also immediately thought of the poisoning of Su Xianxian and the extermination of the entire Luohua sect. The similarity between these 2 incidents was that the other party's methods were astonishing, and the strength hidden in the dark was also very astonishing. Whether it was poisoning Su Xianxian and putting him in a life-or-death situation or exterminating the entire Luohua sect, these weren't things that ordinary forces could do. Moreover, the impact of these two incidents was detrimental to the integration of the entire human martial arts world, and there might be some relationship between them. Chapter 933. The banquet that night could not be considered lively. After all, everyone did not return victorious. In fact, it could even be said that they were dejected. However, this banquet couldn't be skipped. The next day, many of the experts returned while he headed for the Yun Nation. In addition to Lin Xiaola, Lin Yu, Lin Xiaola's best friend, also came along. The two girls, who weren't very smart, felt like old friends at first sight. They regretted not meeting each other earlier. Buy one, get one free. The other two were Gluttonous Duke and Li Yuanzhu. There was also another person who Rinpochen would never have thought of, Exe. Her Majesty has ordered me to follow Zhao Prince Consort no matter where he goes. Exenja pushed up her spectacles, which flashed brightly. His Majesty asked you to protect me? Do you need to follow me to the washroom? Renbachin laughed. This commander's greatest strength was his loyalty, but his greatest weakness was that he only had loyalty. Alright, he was good at fighting. However, he knew nothing about what was happening outside the palace. No, Your Majesty means to follow them. Even when we eat and sleep, we have to follow him. Exenja said frankly. Exenja believed that she had completely understood the Empress's orders. Rinpochen opened his mouth. Even if Her Majesty wants you to keep an eye on me, can't you at least say that it's my personal protection? Was there a need to be so direct? She nodded at him and smiled. Qi Zixiao is very attentive to you, her husband. Rinpochen sighed faintly. Isn't that person guarding against you? Women. Be it the emperor of a country or the lowly peddler, there were some things that people were born with. This was talent. But Your Majesty, aren't you thinking too much? After all, he's the third most powerful expert in the world. How many of them would be as blind as you are? People nowadays only know how to look at appearances. How superficial. What was the use of looking at one's face? Wouldn't they still have to compete in the end? Ahem, I'm wrong. That's the third most powerful expert in the world, Lin Xiaola, who can't be abducted by a lollipop. Lin Yu wasn't someone who could be abducted with just a handful of melon seeds. Depart. On the road, Li Yuanzhu and Gluttonous Duke noticed that the road from Lan City to the Yun Nation was different from other places. There was an extremely clean and tidy road that looked like stone but wasn't. They had seen this material in Lan City before. It seemed to be called cement. He didn't expect Dayo to use this material to pave the roads. Where does this road lead to? She asked. Yun Nation. How extravagant. This path didn't exist a few years ago. Gluttonous Duke was speechless. From construction to completion, it took a total of more than 3 years and is more than 1,600 kilometers long. Renbachin was quite proud of this road. This was the first official road in Dayo, but it wasn't the last. With this path, we can probably shorten the time by half. You guys have put in a lot of effort. It seems like those nobles from the Yun Nation who have escaped don't have to suffer anymore. Gluttonous Duke said casually. Putting aside Rinbachin's nuclear bombs, it would only take 4 to 5 days to travel from Lan City to the Yun Nation on horseback. It would be difficult for those people to cause any trouble. The railway from Lan City to the Yun Nation, which is still under construction, has been completed. In 2 days, we can send 100,000 soldiers from Lan City to the Yun Nation. Rinpochen pointed into the distance. The two of them were skeptical. It was not impossible to cover 1,000 miles in 2 days. If it was the big bird that Rinpochen was riding, it could reach in 1 day. However, it was different for 100,000 soldiers. Including provisions and armaments, it wasn't a small number. It would be good if they could reach the speed of a normal carriage in about 10 days. Although the two of them had never led troops before, they could imagine it. Renbachin saying that it would only take 2 days was really amazing. Hey, this road is better than the official road in Great Xia. Lin Yu suddenly exclaimed after half a day on this road, and the three of them chatted for a long time. It's indeed much better than the previous road. The original road is covered in mud when we run. Lin Xiaola nodded her head. She had followed Rinpochen to many places and knew the condition of those dirt roads very well. Lin Yu looked pensive. The next day, she continued to look pensive. On the third day, she suddenly thought of something and said, "Your alms bowl seems to have a smell." Rinpochen immediately covered his face. "You two have been eating from the same alms bowl for several days, and you only realize this now? This is body fragrance." He said so. Lin Xiaola pointed at Rinpochen. Lin Yu continued to look pensive. Li Yuanzhu and Gluttonous Duke had strange looks in their eyes. Both of them could tell that Lin Xiaola wasn't very smart, but people who weren't smart wouldn't lie. How did Rinpochen say this to her? It wasn't uncommon for rabbits to eat the grass near their nests, but to dare to eat grass near Qi Zixiao's nest was really bold. Rinpochen quickly said, I didn't say that. Lin Xiaola, when did you learn to make false accusations? That time, when you ate from Her Majesty's bowl, you said that it had body fragrance. Lin Xiaola said righteously with a, don't try to deny it, look on her face. Rinpochen was speechless. The group brought 50 guards, all of whom were riding high-quality mounts, and caught up with Qin Chuan at the border of the Yun Nation in 4 days. Sir Qin, this time, the two of us are out on a mission. We will have to trouble you. Rinpochen cupped his hands. Zhao Prince Consort, you don't just do things, right? Qin Chuan cupped his hands at Rinpochen, looked up, and pointed at Li Yuanzhu and the others with his chin. Forget it, I can't control what Zhao Prince Consort wants to do. Her Majesty gave me an order to not let anyone off. This is Her Majesty's order. Rinpochen handed the Empress's handwritten letter to Qin Chuan. After he opened it, he felt as if there was a mountain on the paper, and every word was a beautiful mountain peak. This was the Empress's handwriting. The essence, qi, and spirit of her handwriting were all condensed in it. Ordinary people would be intimidated by the words at a glance, but experts could see the strength of the person who wrote it. Back then, the Empress had used this method to deceive many experts in Great Xia. Qin Chuan glanced at it, folded the letter seriously, and put it in his pocket. Sir Ren, I will head to Pingdu first and rest there for a month. I will also use this time to collect information on the various sections. After a month, I will sweep through each and every sect, from the big to the small, and let them see if my saber is sharp. Thank you, Sir Qin. Rinpochen smiled. 1 month wasn't a long time. However, at this time, it was considered not bad. As for collecting information on the various sects, it was just a casual excuse. Zidonglai had probably checked all the ancestors of the various sects in the Yun Nation by now. We will meet again in Ping City in 1 month. Rinpochen cupped his hands at Qin Chuan. This time, it was different from the last time in Tianjing Basin. In Tianjing Basin, everything was laid out in the open. Whether it was the other party or his own side, they could crush them with force. This time, there was a mastermind hiding behind the scenes. If they did the same thing as last time, they probably wouldn't be able to find anything even after a month. At that time, all the practitioners in the Yun Nation would be wiped out. Thus, they simply split up. Of course, Rinpochen didn't expect their whereabouts to be hidden from others, but it was more convenient to act this way. Besides, with Li Yuanzhu, Gluttonous Duke, Lin Yu, Lin Xiaola, and Exingir around, there was no need to worry about their safety. Chapter 934. After getting rid of the guards, Rinpochen felt relaxed. This was the first time since he came to this world that he didn't have to bring rows of guards with him. Although Lin Xiaola was by his side, there was no difference whether this girl was there or not. As for Exingir, wouldn't it be nice to keep her by his side? However, she really carried out what she said back then. She would follow Rinpochen even to the toilet. Even when he returned to Earth, she would sleep on the floor of his bedroom and wear her armor. Rinpochen felt that he was going crazy from being stared at for the past 2 days. With someone staring at you from behind, most people wouldn't even be able to pee. Other than this small flaw, Rinpochen was still full of anticipation for this trip. Thinking about it, apart from Exingir, There weren't any aboriginals accompanying him. On his left was the third most powerful expert in the world, on his right was an expert rank 20 or so, and behind him was an expert rank 10 or so who wasn't very smart. Apart from Gluttonous Duke, all of them were accompanied by beautiful women, although most of them had holes in their brains. However, the identities of these people made Rinpoche look forward to roaming the world. Their happiness lasted until they entered the city. What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a bald man before? Rinpoche glared at the guards at the city gate with a fierce look on his face. They had been staring at his bald head for a long time. A guard smiled and said, "Please wait a moment." However, a few minutes later, another person with a slightly higher position rushed over. He seemed to be the leader of a small squad. He stepped forward and cupped his hands respectfully. "May I know which ancient lord you are? What brings you to Liang City?" Rinpoche knew that he wasn't an aboriginal. Even though he didn't think so, to others, this person in front of him was definitely an aboriginal. He was bald, tall, and had a ferocious look on his face. Just a glare from his eyes would cause one's heart to tremble. Regardless of whether it was the Yun Nation or Great Xia, it wasn't that there weren't any burly people, but that there weren't any baldies. Even if one was really bald, one would need to pluck a few handfuls of hair from somewhere else to cover his head. In the past, baldies were rarely seen in the Yun Nation, but recently, they were common. However, they were all in groups, whizzing by. I don't see anyone acting alone. Therefore, the captain was a little nervous when he saw Rinpoche alone. He didn't know the other party's purpose for coming. "Which eye of yours thinks that I'm from the aboriginals?" Rinpoche glared. "Huh." The squad leader was stunned. No matter how he looked at it, the person in front of him looked like an aboriginal, but if he was really an aboriginal, he definitely wouldn't say such a thing. "Aren't I just a little bald? A little fatter? Is there anyone in the aboriginals with such delicate features like me?" Rinpoche threw 2 silver beans at her. The other party didn't know if there was anyone in the ancient race who was as handsome as him. But there was definitely no one who would greet them the moment they met. If they were really aboriginals, they would be punched and kicked if they were even a little slower in giving way. Last time, the 2 guards at the west gate were the same. One of them suffered a kick and was sent flying, vomiting blood on the spot. He was bedridden for half a month. Thinking of this, the squad leader felt relieved and hurriedly gave way with a smile. Even though the person in front of him wasn't the granddaddy of the ancient race, he wasn't someone who could be easily bullied. In particular, this group of people looked very strange. There was a bald aboriginal man, a Taoist nun, 2 beautiful ladies, and a beggar. With such a group of people gathered together, one didn't need to think to know that they were people from the Jianghu. Rinpoche and his group entered the city. Even though Rinpoche tried his best to appear very experienced along the way, his gaze was like that of a curious baby. There were even 2 curious babies following behind him. After all, he had been in Dayo ever since he came here. Even though he had been to Great Xia once, he was in a seriously injured state. Along the way, he had been wandering around the wilderness and had never seen the cities of Great Xia before. "Hey, that's a sugar figurine, right? It's quite rare. How much is it? Give me 10. Pinch our faces. If you don't do it well, I won't give you money." "That's a handmade lantern. This is the first time I've seen this kind of thing, and it's quite beautiful." "Boss, what's this fruit? Is it sweet? How much is 1 caddy?" Rinpoche asked for some information, threw a silver bean over and said, "Give me 10 caddies." He stuffed all the fruits that looked like mangoes into Lin Shaola's arms and took one for himself, munching on it as he walked. Li Yuanzhu and Gluttonous Duke were amused by his behavior. They knew that these things were rare in Dayo, but they didn't know that these things had always been rare to Rinpoche. After walking for a long time, Rinpoche suddenly stopped and asked, "Have you noticed that after walking for so long, we haven't seen anyone who looks like they're from the underworld?" Rinpoche's first reaction was that those practitioners from the underworld were hiding somewhere and waiting to welcome the coming storm. This place is too close to the border, and it has been chaotic for the past 2 years. Which martial artist would come here for no reason? Gluttonous Duke casually explained. Rinpoche finally understood. Even though the Yun nation had fallen for 2 years and this place wasn't considered the border anymore, it was still the border in the eyes of the people of the Yun nation. Everyone stayed in Liang City for a day, allowing Rinpoche to enjoy traveling abroad in a feudal society. Over the next few days, they passed by a few more cities and found that there were no practitioners from the underworld. Not only Liang City, but the other cities also couldn't see any practitioners, especially Shi City, which they had just arrived at. They were already in the heart of the Yun nation, but there were still no traces of practitioners from the underworld. Except for the 3 of them, everyone else felt that something was wrong. The other party's power isn't small. Rinpoche looked serious. He still didn't believe that all the practitioners from the Yun nation could band together to kill Wu Kai and the patrol team, so the current situation could only be caused by the other party. However, he didn't know how they did it. How could they capture so many practitioners from the Yun nation? Other than the Imperial Court of Dayo, which force could do such a thing? Even the Imperial Court of Great Xia couldn't do it. This wasn't just a few dozen or hundreds of pigs, but thousands of experts who could leap onto roofs and vault over walls. There's a place called Shueibwa Village half a day's journey away from here. I met their chief several times when I was traveling when I was young. I'll go and see what's going on. Gluttonous Duke said to Rinpoche, "Wait for me here. I'll set off now and will be back tomorrow night." "Thank you." Rinpoche nodded. Gluttonous Duke left his horse behind and went into the crowd. He found a place with fewer people, appeared on a roof in the distance, and left the city in a few flashes. At this time, everyone's mounts had been changed to horses. After all, the mounts of the Aboriginals were too eye-catching, especially the Crow General. Once it flashed its bird, people would know that it was Rinpoche who was coming without having to identify himself. After Gluttonous Duke left, Rinpoche searched the city for a moment and found a grocery store with the word Zhang written on it. He made a mark on the wall with his finger before finding a place to rest. Chapter 935. Your Highness. Rinpoche was leaning against the railing on the second floor and looking down at the hall when a man hurried over to greet him. Rinpoche smiled. He had seen the other party when he first entered the door, and it was an old acquaintance. Zhang Chongke. He was the chief of the Golden Ring residence and Zhang Caixin's father. He was currently the vice-captain of the Yun Guards of the Rearguard Commandery. After a few years, Zhang Chongkong seemed to be more energetic. He wondered if this old tree had bloomed again after being alone in the Yun nation for so long. Otherwise, why did it look so radiant? However, these things had nothing to do with him. Rinpoche turned around and entered the room. "Come in and talk." Exenja was standing behind him just now. When she saw him enter the room, she immediately followed him in and stood in a corner without saying a word. Zhang Chongkong carefully closed the door and acted as if he didn't see Exing. "Why are you here, Your Highness? I heard that there was a man who looked like an Aboriginal heading east from Liang City. I wanted to investigate when I had the time, but I didn't expect it to be Your Highness." Rinpoche nodded slightly. He didn't tell the people of the Rearguard Commandery that he was coming. They had done a good job of noticing him when most of their energy was focused on that big case. After all, they had only been in the Yun nation for more than 3 years and didn't have enough manpower. It seemed like they were developing well locally. If Rinpoche remembered correctly, there were about 10,000 strong men in the Yun nation scattered across more than 400 cities. On average, there were about 20 to 30 people in each city. The lowest position in the Rearguard Commandery was the Tiki, an internal staff member. This kind of strong man was an external staff member, equivalent to a lifelong contract worker, and was mainly responsible for being an informant. Has there been any movement in the Yun nation recently? How is your investigation going? Rinpoche asked directly. Your Highness, ever since that incident, the number of Jianghu people on the streets began to decrease. After that incident, the idle Jianghu people on the streets could hardly be seen anymore. Only the martial artists from the gangs would occasionally appear. We originally built a relationship with some of the Yun nation's martial artists and even recruited a few of them as strong men. We got some information from them, but we haven't confirmed it yet, so we haven't reported it to Your Highness. Zhang Changkong said respectfully. Speak. Many martial artists living in remote places have left recently, and their whereabouts are unknown. Looking at their residences, there were no signs of a fight. They had all left on their own. Some of the experts from the sects have gone into seclusion, but the experts from the big sects are the same as usual. It seems like nothing has changed. What's the situation with the gangs in the Yun Nation? Tell me more. Rinpoche closed his eyes and listened to Zhang Changkong's voice. There are a total of 127 well-known sects and gangs in the Yun Nation. Among them, there are a total of 13 well-known sections. Among them, there are 10 orthodox sects, 2 sects that are neither orthodox nor evil, and there is only one evil sect. These 13 sects were the strongest in terms of strength, status, and influence. They were called the upper 13 sects. In other words, the ones I mentioned just now that weren't affected. Apart from the 13 upper sects, there were 41 other sects with spirit wheel experts. Almost all of them only had one spirit wheel expert. These sects weren't weak either. Altogether, they had close to 50,000 disciples. The rest were mainly gangs formed by earth wheel experts or sects that used to have spirit wheel experts but had declined. Their scope of operations was limited to one city, and there were even 2 or 3 gangs in the vicinity of a city. There were quite a lot of people in these gangs, but there weren't many experts. In particular, the power of these gangs was mostly in the marketplace. The people we roped in were from these gangs. They weren't as cohesive as the sections. Most of their experts were recruited from outside, so they were easier to rope in. How many sects aren't affected now? Rinpoche asked after pondering for a while. As far as we know, there are a total of 34 sects that weren't affected. The chiefs of the other sects are either practicing in seclusion or traveling outside. Were the incidents that happened a few days ago done by these sects? According to our recent investigations, there were more or less experts in these sects whose whereabouts were unknown. As for the rest, we still need time to investigate. Rinpoche opened his eyes, which were filled with coldness. In other words, these sects are all possible? Yes. However, we have calculated that there are only a few hundred experts whose whereabouts are unknown. It seems that they weren't able to quickly surround and kill the patrol team, and none of them escaped. If the top experts were to take action, they would be able to do it. Are there any abnormalities among the ordinary disciples of those sects? He knew that many things in this world couldn't be calculated according to common sense. A few hundred people couldn't seem to kill the patrol team, Wu Kai, Peng Yu, and Li Rui. However, there was a species in this world called the top experts. As long as 2 or 3 of the top experts on the list were involved, it would be enough. No, they have only shrunk their range of activities, and there are no signs of large-scale deployment. Continue to investigate and seize the time. If possible, find a breakthrough in those sections. As for the price, nothing is more important than their lives. In addition, seize the time to investigate the situation of the top experts in the Yun Nation. Rinpoche said. Understood. Go. After Zhang Changkong left, the coldness in Rinpoche's eyes gradually faded, and he frowned. If it was true that so many sects were involved, it would be difficult to deal with them. Even if some of the experts and ordinary disciples weren't involved, the Empress and all the court officials were furious. They didn't have the mood to determine whether these disciples deserved to die or not. As long as they were involved, they couldn't let any of them go. The Empress's order was to kill all the practitioners at the Earthwheel level, and the other order was to kill all the sections. The former referred to the idle martial artists of the Jianghu, while the other referred to the more than 100 sections. Had the experts of the Yun Nation gone mad? Did more than 100 sects have someone from each sect who dared to participate? Or was there some organization that had its tentacles in all the sects? If that was the case, this organization was really scary. What do you think? Rinpoche asked without turning his head. They deserve to die. Exange's cold voice sounded. Rinpoche rubbed his eyebrows. Exange knew his purpose for coming here, let alone the rest of the court and the Empress. He reckoned that even the Empress didn't have high hopes this time. It wasn't that she didn't trust him, but that she wanted to kill them all. I'm doing this to save tens of thousands of lives. I'm really a saint. My wife wants to kill someone, and I come to save them myself. Ren Baqian mocked himself. The door was pushed open, and Li Yuanzhu walked in. She said to Ren Baqian calmly, "This is for the entire human race." The temperament of the aboriginals was like that. They were unreasonable. You are reasonable, far-sighted, and have great ambitions. That's why you're here. Ren Baqian pondered for a while, smiled at her, and said, "I can still praise you a little more. I don't think I'm arrogant yet." Li Yuanzhu chuckled. "These are words from the bottom of my heart, Yuanzhu." Ren Baqian lamented, "Being praised by the third most powerful expert in the world makes me drunk even though I don't have any wine." Li Yuanzhu pursed her lips and smiled without saying a word. She was puzzled as to why Qi Zixiao would choose such a weak man as her husband. Ren Baqian wasn't even a man-wheel expert at the time and was just an ordinary person. Compared to Qi Zixiao, one was in the sky and the other was in the ground. That's right, he was underground, not above ground. However, from their recent interactions, Qi Zixiao had good foresight even though she wasn't good in other aspects. Although this person wasn't strong, he was indeed talented. However, he wasn't proficient in poetry and songs like those scholars. Instead, he was proficient in all aspects. In terms of the nation, Tianjing Basin was subdued by him, and the Jing tribe people now followed his lead. The current situation of the Yun nation was his plan. If it weren't for this incident, the Yun nation would have stabilized in just 2 years. He was the one who wanted to build the official road. Although he hadn't seen its use yet, anyone with a little knowledge would know how useful it was. It was said that Dayo's plan to build a new capital along the river was also planned by him. The shaved ice, glass, street lamps, soap, toothpaste, and even the well salt produced by Dayo during the war were all made by him. As the principal of an academy, he established the first academy in Dayo and nurtured a group of students with practical abilities. He opened bookstores, published newspapers, and enlightened the people. The organization of the Yun nation also relied on him to build the framework. He was also the one who took out the so-called nuclear warheads. Now, he was running around for these Yun nation warriors. It could be said that he alone was equivalent to 1 million soldiers. It had to be said that Qi Zixiao had picked up a treasure. Chapter 936. The people here are so skinny. Lin Xiaola sat on the edge of the bed and muttered as she looked at the people below. They're just like the electric poles in Lan City. Not only was he thin, but he also had a hunched waist. When he walked on the side of the road, he lowered his head and walked quickly. They are all ordinary people. Ren Baqian said faintly, "No matter what kind of society you live in, there will always be the poor and the rich. The rich will be rich, while the poor will find it difficult to find food and clothing. These people are still all right. Although their faces are a little malnourished, they still look healthy. If you have the money to eat vegetables, you might as well eat more meat." Lin Xiaola muttered and turned her head away. Ren Baqian, "Well said." If he had grown up in an environment like Dayo, he would probably say, "Why not eat minced meat?" Here, these words were not exclusive to those pampered young masters. The aboriginal commoners were extremely astonished and said, "He can actually afford to eat. I might as well buy some meat to eat." Just look at the people in the prison camp. No matter where they came from, they ate meat until they vomited, and their eyes lit up when they saw a wild vegetable. However, there were also many benefits. They ate meat every day until they vomited and worked hard every day, so their physiques were much stronger. Compared to the city guards of the Yun nation, they looked more like elite soldiers. It had been 3 years. When he returned, he would have to give them paper vouchers as their salaries. On one hand, it was to give these prisoners of war something to look forward to and strive to keep a group of them as technicians after the end of the decade. On the other hand, it was also to prepare for the currency reform. After all, it was inconvenient to use gold, silver, and copper as currency. It also consumed a large amount of copper to circulate in the market. Copper happened to be a metal that Ren Baqian desperately needed at the moment. electric wires, voltage regulator rheostat, and telephone lines. The annual copper output of Dayo and the Yun Nation was simply a drop in the bucket compared to what he needed. Copper alloy has excellent wear resistance, corrosion resistance, castability, and mechanical properties. It can also play a great role in a variety of bearings and mechanical parts. Just like on Earth, the quality of a lot of equipment could be determined by looking at whether the internal parts were made of copper. No matter what, Rinpoche couldn't tolerate this metal, which had such huge uses, being used as currency in the market. However, he had to settle the matters in the Yun Nation first before he could do this. What about those sex experts who were in seclusion or wandering outside? More than half of the leaders of more than 100 sects had actually made such a gesture. What were they doing? Or was he hiding from something? Let's wait and see the news that Gluttonous Duke brings back first. If it doesn't work, I might as well capture a few sect leaders and ask them. While Rinpoche was deep in thought, a figure passed through the window and landed beside them. He was wearing patched clothes, had messy white hair and beard, and had a face full of wrinkles. It was Gluttonous Duke. First, he grabbed the wine pot and took a big gulp before letting out a comfortable moan. "You've worked hard. How's the situation? Any news?" Rinpoche asked. Gluttonous Duke stroked his beard with an ugly expression on his face. "We missed. The people in the stronghold are all gone." "Strange, why did that guy leave? And all the people in the stronghold had left? From what I've seen, he's been gone for at least 3 months, and there's no sign of him returning." Rinpoche frowned. Although he didn't have eyebrows, his action was still the same. This is not good news. This also confirmed Zhan Changkong's words. Some idol experts had gone missing. What's his name? What's his strength? Linny. The last time I saw him was 10 years ago. At that time, he was only 1 step away from condensing a heaven-grade weapon. Those who could condense a heaven-grade weapon were already considered top-notch experts. As long as it wasn't a rare situation where a heaven-grade weapon didn't improve one's strength, it wouldn't be a problem for one to enter the top 60 to 70 ranks of the world's experts. There were more than 20 spirit wheel experts in Tianjing Basin, but only a few had condensed a heaven-grade weapon. There were only 70 to 80 spirit wheel experts in the entire Yun Nation, and only a dozen or so had condensed a heaven-grade weapon. There were more experts in Great Xia. There were more than 200 famous spirit wheel experts and 30 to 40 who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon. They were only 1 step away from condensing a heaven-grade weapon and could be said to be famous in the entire world. Such a person suddenly disappeared, coupled with the experts from the sects who were either in seclusion or traveling. No matter how one looked at it, this matter was very unusual. Rinpoche pondered for a moment before looking up at Li Yuanzhu and Gluttonous Duke. The former was also pondering, while the latter was chewing to his heart's content. One could tell what he liked from his name. He isn't the only one who has gone missing. Many people have gone missing as well. Rinpoche told them about the news that he had received from Zhan Changkong. It was mainly about Gluttonous Duke. Although Li Yuanzhu wasn't in the room at that time, the sounds in the entire inn couldn't escape her ears. In that case, something big must have happened. Gluttonous Duke's expression immediately turned serious. "Let's split up," Rinpoche said in a deep voice. "Gluttonous Duke, contact your old friends and Gao Yi's Jr. If you don't find anything, then take the opportunity to investigate the situation." Gluttonous Duke, you can make the decision yourself. As for Zhenren Li, I have something to trouble you with. That's settled then. Where shall we meet? Gluttonous Duke didn't hesitate at all. He reached out to wipe the grease stains on the side of his mouth and prepared to set off again. Meet at Yongjiang City in half a month. A map of the Yun Nation flashed across Rinpoche's mind. The largest sect of the Yun Nation was nearby, Mount Lu. Alright. After saying this, Gluttonous Duke disappeared as if he had never been there. There were 2 other tables of customers on the 2nd floor of the restaurant. They had long noticed this strange group of people and immediately widened their eyes when they saw this scene as if they had seen a ghost in broad daylight. A moment later, Rinpoche contacted Zhan Changkong. Zhan Changkong knew that he was here and had been keeping an eye on him. Less than 15 minutes after Rinpoche left the mark, Zhang Chongkong appeared in front of him. Rinpoche inquired about the situation of the surrounding sects and asked Zhang Chongkong to investigate Lin Ye's whereabouts. He then found Li Yuanzhu and said, "Shinren Li, there's a boat gang nearby. I'm going to meet their leader tonight. What are your plans?" "He's in seclusion, right? I'll go with you tonight and take a look. I'm getting more and more curious," Li Yuanzhu said faintly. "Alright, regardless of whether there's a mastermind behind this, they definitely won't let you off if they know that you're here. If you die, I'm afraid that we'll have to spend the rest of our lives in this land of exile." Rinpoche smiled. He believed that he had a little ability to protect himself, mainly because Lin Qiaola, Xianzhe, and Lin Yu had the ability to protect him. However, even the Deputy Protector General and 2 captain commanders of the Protectorate of the Northeast were besieged and killed on the same day. The strength of the other party was definitely far superior to his side. Of course, he could escape with a few people and come back with his big treasure. However, there would be a lot more variables. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 937. The Boat Gang. Just from the name, one could tell that it was a gang filled with the aura of a marketplace. The boat gang was established more than 100 years ago. At that time, a boat captain met a seriously injured and dying practitioner by chance and obtained a few secret manuals from him. It had to be said that he was quite talented. Relying on self-study and communicating with others, he was able to make a name for himself and become an earth wheel expert. At that time, he was grateful for the hard life of his brothers who ran the boat. Now that they were strong, he established the boat gang with the aim of uniting them and not being bullied. The current leader of the boat gang was a descendant of that boat captain. In addition to the leader, there were 2 other earth wheel experts in the boat gang. In the middle section of Mianjiang, they were considered to have some power. Of course, in Rinpoche's eyes, this power was basically no different from that of ordinary people. 3 earth wheel experts weren't enough for Lin Qiaola to sharpen her claws. The boat gang wasn't located on the banks of Mianjiang, but at the foot of a mountain not far away. There was a large manor there. At night, Rinpoche and the others left their mounts in the city and went straight to the boat gang. After running for a long time, Lin Yu suddenly asked, "What are you doing out so late at night?" She didn't know anything, and when she saw everyone coming out, she followed them without a second thought. Of course, if she were to think about it, she would have to think about tomorrow morning. "To meet someone," Rinpoche replied. Lin Yu only responded with an "oh." If there were any problems, they would have to wait until tomorrow morning. The headquarters of the boat gang was quite big and brightly lit. There were tens of thousands of disciples in the boat gang, and most of them were ordinary people. There were usually a few hundred people in the headquarters. There were 4 guards outside the main gate. Rinpoche and the others went around to the side and jumped onto the wall. They could see people coming and going in the distance. Overall, it was peaceful, and they didn't know that someone had found them. Rinpoche squatted on top of the wall while Lin Yu squatted beside him. They were like a row of melon eaters. Rinpoche heard crunching sounds and turned to see that Lin Yu was still eating melon seeds. He didn't know how many she had brought from Lan City, but she hadn't finished them after so many days. "Be serious. We are doing business," Rinpoche said with a straight face. "You want to eat?" Lin Yu stretched out her hand and opened it. There was still half a handful of melon seeds left. Rinpoche, without hesitation, he snatched the melon seeds and squatted on top of the wall to observe. After finishing half a handful of melon seeds, Rinpoche happened to see someone coming in from the half-moon gate. He was delighted and ordered, "Capture him and keep him alive." With a gust of wind, Xianzhe appeared beside that person. Before that person could react, she had already grabbed him by the neck. Rinpoche motioned for Xianzhe to release him after dragging him far away. It was a young man in his 20s. He looked at the people in front of him in fear. "Who are you people? Recognize your own situation. I'm the one asking you, not you." A silver light flashed in Rinpoche's hand. A gold and silver spear appeared in his hand, and he pointed it at the other party's throat. She looked at him in astonishment. This was obviously a heaven-grade weapon that could only be condensed by a spirit wheel expert. How could he have one? Was he hiding his strength? Impossible. It was impossible for the other party to hide from him. Or could it be that he was a spirit wheel expert in the past, but he was seriously injured and fell? No matter how much a spirit wheel expert's strength fell, it was impossible for him to fall to the level of an ordinary person. She still remembered the first time she met him. At that time, he was a completely ordinary person. The length, color, and the feeling it gave, it was inexplicably familiar. Was it Ting Yu's spear? What was going on? Almost as soon as the silver spear appeared, her attention was completely focused on the spear in Rinpoche's hand. The young man who was being pointed at by the silver spear couldn't believe his eyes when he saw this scene. He then thought of something, and his expression suddenly changed. Although few people had seen a spirit wheel expert who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon, almost all of them were famous figures. How could such a person appear here? Not to mention such a top expert, even an ordinary spirit wheel expert wasn't someone that the boat gang could resist. "Senior, what do you want to ask?" "I don't know much. If you go directly to the headquarters, even the left guardian will answer all your questions." Seeing that his goal had been achieved, Rinpoche flipped his palm and withdrew the silver spear. Of course, he could directly barge into the headquarters with his men and threaten the other party to bring him to where the gang leader was cultivating in seclusion. However, that would be too easy to alert the enemy. Up until now, he still didn't know if there were any of his men in the boat gang. He might as well kidnap someone first to understand the situation. "I will ask and you will answer. If you are honest, I will spare your life. I don't have any malicious intentions toward the boat gang, but there are some things that I want to understand. Now, let me ask you, is your gang leader cultivating in seclusion? Where is he? How does he communicate with the outside world? How do you know that he is cultivating in seclusion? What happened before he went into seclusion? Who is in charge of the overall situation now?" Rinpoche opened his mouth and asked a series of questions. The gang leader is cultivating in a cave in the mountain behind the headquarters. He went in by himself, and nothing happened before he went in. Sometimes, he would send a voice from inside to get people to send things in. Every time, it is the left guardian who sends the things in. Now, the left guardian is in charge of the overall situation. The other party didn't dare to hide anything and quickly spat out everything he knew. "You have 2 guardians, right? What are their names? What's the other guardian doing?" "The left guardian is Zwalungtong, and the right guardian is Baija. I heard that they have been sent out by the gang leader to do something." "Is the left guardian here?" "Yes. The gang leader is cultivating in seclusion, and the right guardian is out on some matters. The left guardian has been sitting in the headquarters." After getting the information he wanted, Rinpoche nodded at Li Yuanzhu and asked, "Can you knock him out?" "I'm afraid that I won't be able to control my strength. You should be more experienced in this matter." Rinpoche really didn't know how much strength was needed to knock someone out, and it would be bad if he was beaten to death. He just needed to not be discovered before he met the gang leader. Li Yuanzhu was a little speechless after hearing this. What did he mean by more experienced? However, she still stretched out her finger and flicked the young man in the air. "Let's go to the back mountain." Along the way, Li Yuanzhu wanted to ask Rinpoche about the heaven-grade weapon, but she didn't have the chance. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the back mountain, and she had no choice but to suppress her questions. It didn't take long for everyone to find a platform on the mountainside. There were 2 man-wheel experts guarding the platform. Without needing Rinpoche to say anything, Li Yuanzhu flicked her finger and knocked them out. Everyone landed on the platform and didn't look around. They only saw 2 tall wooden doors embedded in a cave in front of them. If she wasn't mistaken, this was where the gang leader was cultivating in seclusion. Without hesitation, Rinpoche stepped forward and kicked the wooden door. Bang! The entire wooden door shook. Rinpoche's face suddenly lit up. It was colorful and exceptionally exciting. This wooden door was actually made of wood covered with iron plates. Damn it, I've kicked an iron plate this time. This thought came to Rinpoche's mind, and the sharp pain in his toes made him gasp. Ta! Rinpoche breathed heavily as if this could alleviate the pain in his feet. Li Yuanzhu, who was beside him, felt like laughing for some reason. This scene was indeed too exciting. Chapter 938. The doctor probably felt that I had damaged his reputation by causing such a small wound. He was a little anxious and strictly forbade me from sitting down to work at night. In addition, my work and rest schedule also affected the healing of the wound. I might as well take a day off last night. Today, I will get a bed and table and lie on the bed to write my novel. The pretty boy of the Empress's family took a day off yesterday. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 939. The black mud ointment for external injuries and the ointment for bone fracture were the two miraculous medicines that must be brought out whenever one went out. Regardless of whether it was for a vacation or to silence a witness who would not be killed by someone else. At this time, the value of this godly medicine was revealed. Rinpoche sat at the side, took off his boots, and carefully applied the ointment. Lin Yu, who was standing at the side, seemed to have thought of something. She went up and kicked the wooden door. Boom. Ah, it's really made of iron. Lin Yu confirmed her suspicions with a limp. She took off her embroidered shoes and revealed her white feet. As expected, her toes were visibly red and swollen. He's not in the right mind, and neither are you? Can't you just use a kick? Lin Xiaola said resentfully. Rinpoche, how could he endure Lin Xiaola's words? Li Yuanzhu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lin Yu had never been like this before? He heard the noise coming from the foot of the mountain. The noise just now had already spread down, and he reckoned that someone would come up very soon. She went forward and pushed the door with both hands, but it didn't budge. It seemed like a simple push, but Li Yuanzhu used a lot of strength. Even though the door was made of pure iron, it was still sent flying by her push. The door of the boat gang's seclusion place was indeed very sturdy. Not only was the door made of fine steel, but some rare metals had also been added to it. That was indeed the case. Not only was the door made of fine steel, even the stone walls on both sides were made of fine steel. Not only was this cave a place for seclusion, but it also served as an escape route. When Rinpoche first built this mountain villa, he considered that if he encountered an enemy that he couldn't defend against, this door could at least hold off an ordinary spirit wheel expert for 10 minutes. A cyan bamboo sword appeared in her palm out of thin air. She pointed it forward without making too much noise, but countless cracks spread from the center of the bamboo sword to the surroundings. Soon after, the entire door suddenly collapsed. The door that the boat gang had placed their hopes on was smashed by this simple and ordinary touch. It's empty, Li Yuanzhu said after taking a glance. As expected, it's empty. Rinpoche wasn't surprised at all. In fact, when he heard that many sex experts were in seclusion, he had already thought of this possibility. There were only 3 possibilities for the whereabouts of these experts. Either they pretended to be in closed-door training, or they were forced into closed-door training, or they were already dead and the closed-door training was just a facade. This time, he only came to confirm what kind of person it was. In fact, after that kick, there was no reaction from inside, so he knew it was empty. Since it was empty, the person who knew the whereabouts of the boat gang leader was the left protector. Was he pretending to be in seclusion, hiding his identity to do other things, or was he already dead? Before anyone came up, Rinpoche took advantage of the light to take a look inside. The cave wasn't very big, and there were 3 stone rooms inside. One of them was piled with some food, while the other 2 were empty. Who's there? The person who came was very fast. Before Rinpoche could finish looking around, he heard a voice coming from outside. But the last word sounded like a rooster being grabbed by the neck. Rinpoche hurriedly walked out. When he was near the door, his gaze suddenly froze. He moved closer to the door and took a closer look. He had some kind of conjecture. He stretched out his hand and pushed outwards. The undamaged half of the door was pushed open, Open. Rinpoche looked at Li Yuanzhu, who was standing outside, with a pained expression. The door opens outward. Li Yuanzhu was speechless. It wasn't locked. It opened with a pull. Li Yuanzhu, she still tried hard to maintain the indifferent attitude of an expert, but the corners of her mouth twitched a little. After all, she had done something stupid. Rinpoche mourned for his foot for a minute before looking up ahead. There wasn't one person but 3. At this moment, they were all lying on the ground. Exenja was stepping on one of them with one foot and holding another in her hand. In addition, there were also people running up the mountain. Who's the left protector, Zwalungta? Rinpoche asked with a smile. Let him go. Cough cough. For you. How's our gang leader? The person who was being held by Exenja touched his throat with a look of lingering fear. However, he suppressed his fear when he saw the broken door. Do you all like to ask questions? Rinpoche smiled, and the spear appeared in his hand again. This was much more persuasive than words. Sure enough, the other party's expression immediately changed, and he trembled with fear. He wasn't this afraid when Exenja stepped on the 3 of them and rubbed them on the ground. However, it was different now that he knew that the person in front of him was a spirit will expert who had condensed a heaven-grade weapon. Who's Zwalungtong? The man immediately looked at the other man lying on the ground. The other man had already stood up, leaving only this person lying motionlessly on the ground. Rinpoche's expression changed slightly, and he asked Exenja, "Did you trample him to death?" "I didn't use any force." Everyone's expression changed, and they went forward to check on the man. His face was green, his lips were black, and there was black blood and white foam in his mouth. Rinpoche checked his breathing and found that he was dead. Left protector. The other 2 people shouted. He committed suicide by taking poison. Rinpoche frowned. He reckoned that the poison had been hidden in his mouth all along. However, this person was really decisive to commit suicide immediately upon seeing that the situation wasn't looking good. What exactly was the identity of this left protector? The manipulator behind the scenes has such strong control? This person was walking at the back, so I thought he was a lackey. Exenja added, explaining why she stepped on him. She also knew what Rinpoche wanted to investigate this time, but the first person he investigated committed suicide by taking poison. She felt somewhat apologetic. Forget it. If I didn't know that they would do this, it would indeed be difficult to guard against them. I will have experience next time. Rinpoche didn't care too much. Although he was already dead, it also verified one thing. There was a big problem with these experts going into seclusion. Furthermore, there was indeed someone from the other party in the boat gang, and he was one of the 2 protectors under the chief. It wasn't only the boat gang, but also the other sections. Everyone, what exactly happened? The man who spoke earlier asked in a pleading tone. After all, the boat gang didn't have the strength to question the people in front of them. Your chief isn't inside. It's empty. As for his whereabouts, I'm afraid only Zwalungtong knows. You have seen the rest, Rinpoche said faintly. Are you looking for our chief? We just want to verify some things. Now we have achieved half of our goal. Rinpoche couldn't be bothered to explain too much, and the other party didn't need to know too much. It was already kind of him to explain this. Let's go. Rinpoche turned and left in the direction where there were no torches. He wasn't afraid of encountering any conflicts with the boat gang, but there was no need to kill more people. This time, he came out to save people, not to kill. More importantly, his heart was heavy at the moment, and he was even in pain. Damn it, that door actually opened outward. Please remember the domain name of this book. Wonderful Book House mobile version website. Chapter 940. Let's wait and see. Perhaps someone will come out and release a messenger bird or something. Rinpoche circled around and returned to the outside of the manor. Compared to checking them one by one, following the vines to the melon was obviously a better method. Exing, go to the east side of the manor, Rinpoche said. Her Majesty asked me to follow you. Exenja was expressionless. He sighed, cupped his hands at her and said, Thank you for your trouble. She chuckled and disappeared into the darkness in a flash. After she left, he turned to look at the people around him. They were all very good fighters, but unfortunately, none of them were useful. One of them clearly stated that he was here to monitor him, one of them might sleep for 100 years after he was released, and the last one had a bad brain. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Lin Yu moved closer to him and asked weakly. "Ask away. Why did you kick the door just now?" Lin Yu felt pity for her toes. "My toes are swollen." Ren Baqian looked at Lin Yu and then at the sky. How should he answer this question? Say that he had a screw loose? "Let's not talk about why I kicked the door." "Why did you kick the door?" Lin Yu waited for a long time, but there was no answer. She persistently asked, "Why?" Ren Baqian turned his head and looked at her. He didn't expect her to be so persistent this time. He thought for a while and said, "To test a conjecture." Ren Baqian originally wanted to wait for her to ask before telling her that punching a wall would hurt. This was the reaction of force. He didn't expect her to respond with an "oh" and continue to be deep in thought at the side. Ren Baqian felt as if he had punched cotton. He was depressed and sullen. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have thought about it. Everyone waited until the sky brightened, but they still didn't receive the pigeons that they had expected. There was no point in waiting any longer, so they might as well take the time to visit the other sections. "How did you get that heaven-grade weapon?" Along the way, Li Yuanzhu finally had the chance to ask the question that she had been thinking about all night. Ren Baqian's face darkened. "This is probably what it means to be gifted. Although I haven't reached the spirit wheel level yet, I have already condensed a heaven-grade weapon." As he spoke, an iron chain shot out from his body like a snake and coiled around her body a few times. Coincidentally, it was at the top of the mountain and the bottom of the mountain respectively. But it was useless. The prerequisite was that there must be a mountain. Li Yuanzhu's expression changed slightly, and she was a little embarrassed. She didn't pay much attention to the metal chain when it came, but the position where it wrapped around her made her very concerned. She looked at him with a profound gaze. "Sorry, I'm not very familiar with it yet," Ren Baqian said awkwardly. He had only given the order to keep the other party occupied. He really did not choose this position, and he would not take advantage of an airport. A heaven-grade weapon is condensed by the owner's spirit and is like an extension of the owner's limbs. What the heaven-grade weapon senses is what the owner feels. There was a hint of coldness in her words. "Although I'm not Qi Zi Xiao, I don't mind breaking my limbs." "I didn't. I picked this up. Where did I get this thing? Condensing a divine weapon? How could this be? Also, have you ever seen anyone condense two divine weapons? Not to mention that I'm only an earthwheel expert." Ren Baqian immediately changed his words. This was the first time he had heard of this. "You picked it up?" Li Yuanzhu's face was full of indecipherable meaning. "I picked it up, I really picked it up." Ren Baqian nodded repeatedly. He really wasn't taking advantage of her. "Exenja? What are you doing? What did you write in the book?" After wasting a long time, Ren Baqian was still explaining that he picked up this heaven-grade weapon. As for whether she believed him or not, it was obvious from her expression that she didn't. However, Ren Baqian himself couldn't explain it clearly. After all, he wasn't prepared to tell her about Earth. Besides, she couldn't figure out why he had two heaven-grade weapons and could only continue to be puzzled. Yun Nation, Heyun District, Misty Rain House. Very few of these sects were located in the cities. Most of them were located in famous mountains and rivers, or even in the wilderness. This was the case with the Misty Rain House. The ancestors of the Misty Rain House used to be famous. At its peak, there were 7 spirit wheel experts in the sect, and they were considered to be famous. However, only the chief of the sect was a spirit wheel expert. Even so, the Misty Rain House was still quite famous. The most important thing was that all the disciples in the Misty Rain House were female, and each of them had a slim figure. It was as if they were shrouded in mist, making it hard for people to see them clearly. Although they were clearly standing there and there was no fog around them, it gave off such an illusion. As the ancients said, those who wore clothes were more beautiful than those who weren't. The disciples of the Misty Rain House were the opposite. Even if they weren't wearing clothes, They wouldn't disappoint you at all. Therefore, the female disciples of the Misty Rain House had always been the targets of many young heroes and rich young masters. Early in the morning, a drawn-out voice broke through the thin morning mist that shrouded the Misty Rain House. "Su Ning, Guardian Su, please come out. No noise outside the Misty Rain House." "Who's there?" Figures shot out like lightning, and one by one, the graceful ladies landed outside the Misty Rain House. Rinpoche glanced around with his hands behind his back. Although the Misty Rain House only had one spirit wheel expert, there were a lot of earth wheel experts. There were also many high-level man wheel disciples. Their foundation was indeed much deeper than those small sects. The disciples were indeed not bad. Their looks were also not bad. They were clearly standing there for everyone to see, but there was always a sense of mystery that was shrouded in mist. The Misty Rain House was indeed worthy of its name. More than 20 people jumped out with angry looks on their faces. They were obviously angry that someone actually dared to make a ruckus outside the Misty Rain House. "Who are you? You're really bold to actually make a ruckus outside the Misty Rain House and even ask Guardian Su to come and see you? Who are you? Have you sent a visitation card? Is this person's head smeared with oil? Who's that Taoist nun? She's so beautiful. She looks so fierce. She doesn't seem like a good person." The ancients once said that a woman was equivalent to 500 ducks. Faced with 10,000 ducks, Rinpoche immediately felt uncomfortable and immediately understood what his Baihu meant when he said that this place was more noisy. "Zhao Prince Consort of Dayo is here. Su Ning, come out and pay your respects," Rinpoche said with a sullen face. This was already the 10th day since they left the boat gang. Rinpoche and his group had gone to 17 sects at top speed. Other than the boat gang and the life and death sect that they went to on the first day, the people who contacted the other sects had either disappeared or committed suicide. They didn't see anyone alive. Rinpoche knew that the other party already knew that he was here to investigate this matter, so he didn't hide it anymore. Where did this madman come from? Zhao. Before he could finish his sentence, he was covered up by someone. Is he Zhao Prince Consort of Dayo? He looks so handsome. His forehead is so shiny. He's indeed not an ordinary person. Zhao Prince Consort has arrived. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. Finally, someone came out to take charge of the situation. It was a rather charming woman in her 30s. She was thick in places where she should be thick and thin. To put it simply, she had a bucket-like figure. However, her expression was refreshing, and her voice was full of energy. She wasn't annoying at all. The people in the Misty Rain House are all little girls who are ignorant of worldly affairs and didn't know that you were here. Please be magnanimous and don't blame us. The person laughed. Are you Su Ning? Rinpoche sized her up. I'm an Iru. Guardian Su should have come out to greet you, but she has been seriously ill these days. If you want to see her, you can only meet her at the door. But, please forgive me for not recognizing you. Can you prove your identity? An Iru bowed and apologized with a smile on her face. The silver spear in Rinpoche's hand appeared out of thin air and then disappeared without a trace. This thing was more useful than any proof of identity. An expert who had condensed a spirit wheel and a heaven-grade weapon was well known in this world, so he naturally wouldn't lie. As for whether the rumored Zhao Prince Consort had such strength, no one dared to doubt it. Sure enough, an Iru's gaze froze. She then bowed and said, I was rash. Zhao Prince Consort, please come in. She waved to both sides and everyone dispersed. After Rinpoche followed her into the Misty Rain House, she probed, May I know why Zhao Prince Consort is looking for Sister Su? Where's your chief? Rinpoche asked. She's in seclusion in a secret chamber and can't be disturbed. I'm afraid we can only wait for her to come out of seclusion before she can meet Zhao Prince Consort to apologize in person. Rinpoche nodded. He didn't ask to meet the chief since the final outcome would be the same anyway. It was more important to meet Su Ning first. Wasn't Su Ning fine a few days ago? Why did she suddenly fall ill? Rinpoche asked faintly. In fact, Guardian Su has been ill for a long time, but her condition suddenly worsened recently. Guardian Su, please explain the specifics. And Iru led Rinpochen and the others for more than 10 minutes. There were many courtyards and embroidery buildings on both sides, and it was filled with the smell of women. From time to time, they could see beautiful young girls bowing to them from afar. In particular, there was a woman with picturesque features, a slim figure, and extremely attractive. She bowed to them from afar, got up with a smile on her face, and her eyes were sparkling. This is the most outstanding disciple of the next generation in the Misty Rain House. Her name is Yuan Qingyi. After hearing about what you did for the captive camp, she has always been very grateful to you. Someone must have told her about it, so she specially came out to meet you. And Iru chuckled. Rinpochen glanced at her. She was indeed excellent, especially with the mixture of immaturity and shyness on her body. Any man would be attracted to her. Unfortunately, Exenja was with him. Exenja, what are you doing? What are you writing in the book? The group walked a few rounds and came to a courtyard. And Iru said, Guardian Su looks a little scary when she's sick. You must be mentally prepared. Rinpochen nodded. And Iru stood outside a small building and said, Guardian Su is on the second floor. This way, please. As soon as Rinpochen lifted his foot, and Iru stopped the people behind him and said, Very well. Guardian Su's illness is only transmitted to women and not to men. If you want to go in, you must make some preparations. Rinpochen was a little curious. What kind of illness was only transmitted to women and not to men? He stepped over the threshold and walked a few steps inside. The first floor of the building was full of paintings, especially the woman in red in the painting. Rinpochen couldn't take his eyes off her. Although the woman was just standing there, she gave off the vibe of a towering mountain and was cold. Rinpochen recognized her at a glance. That was obviously the Empress. Why was the Empress's painting here? Why was there a painting of the Empress here? The people outside saw Rinpochen standing there looking at the painting, but they didn't care. They were about to take the veil that an Iru handed over to cover their faces when something unexpected happened. An Iru suddenly exploded without warning, and the sky was filled with a rain of blood. Everyone subconsciously hid. Then, a few loud noises and the ground trembled came from the small building. Everyone took a closer look and saw that the door of the small building was blocked by a 6-inch thick, pitch-black iron plate, or rather, a piece of iron that had fallen from the top of the door. Oh no, there's danger. Li Yuanzhu dodged and pointed her sword forward. At this moment, a terrifying sword energy shot out from outside the wall, forcing her to turn around to save herself. Lin Qiaola, who was the fastest, had already crashed into the window next to her. Boom! The iron plate wasn't a single piece. The entire interior of the small building was surrounded by the iron plate. Rinpochen was inside, and everyone else was outside. Exenja's face changed drastically, and her skin began to turn red as if blood was about to drip from the surface of her skin. Her aura rose steadily as she punched the iron block inside the door, each punch stronger than the previous one. After 3 punches, the 6-inch thick iron block was directly smashed into pieces and exploded. However, there was no one in the room. Let's set a small goal first. Chapter 941. Li Yuanzhu stood with her sword in her right hand and looked at the big hole in the courtyard wall. Her eyes became extremely dark like an abyss that seemed to be able to swallow people and the world. Su Wuming. The sword energy just now was so amazing that she had no choice but to turn over and protect herself. Among the famous experts in the world, only one person could use this sword energy, Su Wuming, who had been in hiding for a long time. Moreover, she had heard a little about Su Wuming from Rinpochen. Sai, you don't know what you are doing. The person outside the courtyard wall didn't reveal himself and only let out a long sigh. It's you who doesn't know what you are doing. Li Yuanzhu traversed more than 30 meters in an instant, leaving a faint line behind her. When she pointed with her sword, the air, flowers, and courtyard wall in front of her suddenly disappeared as if an invisible beast had bitten them off. Ding! A sword ray suddenly appeared in front of her, as if it was creating something out of nothing. In other words, it tore through space and appeared in front of Li Yuanzhu. The two swords collided and made a soft sound. Li Yuanzhu tapped her feet and retreated several meters. There were abnormal fluctuations in the air. The air on one side of Li Yuanzhu seemed to have encountered an invisible black hole and was sucked toward a certain point. Even the air began to distort. On the other side, the sound of cloth tearing could be heard, and one could vaguely see abnormal cracks in the air. Both sides were in a stalemate for a moment when a certain point in the air suddenly exploded. A gust of wind swept through, and soil flew everywhere. However, a cold sword ray tore through everything and went straight for Li Yuanzhu's face. Ding! Li Yuanzhu's expression changed slightly. She pointed her sword 3 times in a row and retreated from one end of the courtyard to the other before the sword ray dissipated. However, the aura on the other end of the courtyard wall had already gone far away. Li Yuanzhu frowned and rushed into the house, only to see that the ground had been turned upside down. Even the ground was made of fine steel, but there was a hole in one place. Exinja and Lin Xiaola had already jumped down. Lin Yu was still standing there eating melon seeds and obviously hadn't recovered yet. "Follow me," Li Yuanzhu said before jumping down. Lin Yu touched her head, looked upstairs, and then at her feet. She pondered for a moment before jumping down. It would take a long time to describe, but everything happened in an instant. It was about 20 meters underground. She jumped down and saw Exinja and Lin Xiaola. There were 6 paths in front of them, or it could be said that the bottom of the house was just one of the nodes of these paths. Which direction? Exinja's face was gloomy. Her fist was bleeding profusely, but it was as if she didn't feel anything. Lin Xiaola sniffled and sniffled again. Finally, she lay on the ground and sniffled. She raised her head with a puzzled expression. "There's no smell of that guy. But the most recent smell is heading in that direction." Without saying a word, Exinja chased after the passageway that Lin Xiaola had pointed out. After chasing for an hour, the group saw a ray of light ahead of them, and the sound of water followed. Rushing out, they found themselves beside a waterfall. "Where should we go?" Exinja asked again. "The smell is gone. It seems to have stopped here." Exinja's face was filled with doubt. "Water!" Li Yuanzhu was the first to react. Lin Yu followed behind the 3 of them, deep in thought. What are they going to do? Prince Zhao was still upstairs. At this moment, Rinpochen was smiling, but it was a bitter smile. He heard Li Yuanzhu shout, "Su Wuming." He also heard Exinja smashing the metal plate downstairs. He also knew that everyone had jumped into a hole in the ground. However, he didn't dare to say a word. Everyone was simply too fast. Before he could think of a way to spread the news that he was here, they had already disappeared. The other party had used some unknown method to conceal their auras, and even Li Yuanzhu didn't realize that they were upstairs. Everyone subconsciously thought that they had been caught and escaped through the tunnel. "Brother, you are still quite obedient." A charming and seductive voice rang in Rinpochien's ear. The face that was next to his slowly moved away, and the jade-like hand that was stuck on his neck was slowly released. The hand was beautiful. It was as if it was carved out of white jade. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a jade-like hand. If this was the most beautiful hand in the world, Rinpochen would consider it and nod in agreement. The fingernails on the hand were also very long, at least 2 centimeters long. There weren't any flaws at all, and it was obvious that the owner took great care of them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to do this. Although Rinpochen didn't see it, he could imagine that there wouldn't be a speck of dust on such long fingernails. With such a beautiful hand and flawless fingernails, the owner must be very beautiful as well. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Rinpochen had to admit that he always met beautiful women. For example, the Empress, Li Yuanzhu, Lin Yu, Exing, and the cross-dresser. However, the woman in front of him was still breathtakingly beautiful. Purple eyeshadow was still very rare in this world. She had loose bangs, red lips that were like flames, a pair of phoenix eyes that were somewhat similar to the Empress's, and there was a mole at the corner of her eye. All of these combined to form a woman that made Rinpochen feel breathtakingly beautiful. Most importantly, she was protruding forward and concave back. Just now, Rinpoche felt that he had dribbled the ball into someone. He had to say that it was a good ball. However, Rinpoche felt that the most breathtakingly beautiful thing wasn't the beauty of this woman, but the smell of her pink fingernails. It was a sweet and intoxicating smell. He didn't need to think to know that it was poisonous, and it was extremely poisonous. He didn't know if the other party would have died if he had made any strange moves just now, but he was definitely going to die. At this moment, she pulled her face away and looked at Rinpoche with a smile. "Hello, big sister." Rinpoche looked as obedient and well-behaved as a harmless young man could be. Unfortunately, he forgot that he had a fierce face, a bald head, and no eyebrows. Inexplicably, he thought of the time when he first met the Empress. It seemed like he had to survive in a desperate situation again. "It's been a long time since someone called me big sister." The woman touched her face and sighed. Slap. Rinpoche was stunned by the sudden slap. A wave of anger rose from the soles of his feet to the top of his head, and a fierce look flashed in his eyes. However, he calmed down in the blink of an eye. He swung his hand and slapped himself. The woman opened her small mouth slightly and was obviously a little surprised. Just now, both sides weren't very symmetrical. "This looks better." Rinpoche smiled. The woman smiled and looked at him with interest as if she was re-examining him. Then, she turned around in front of Rinpoche and asked, "Am I beautiful?" "Who said that you aren't beautiful? You must be blind." "I'm not blind." Rinpoche replied honestly. "Therefore, I can't say that you aren't beautiful." "Then, between me and Qi Zixiao, who is more beautiful?" The woman's eyes were full of expectation as if she was a young girl waiting for her sweetheart to praise her. However, Rinpoche knew that this person in front of him wasn't easy to deal with. In fact, apart from Lin Yu, whose brain circuit was like the Mariana Trench, and Lin Xiaola, who could increase her cultivation level in her sleep, no one who could cultivate to this level was easy to deal with. Furthermore, this was a fatal question. "I know of a mirror. As long as you ask it, magic mirror, who is the most beautiful person in the world, it will tell you." Rinpoche said. "I think it will definitely tell you that you are the most beautiful person in the world." "Do you mean that I'm more beautiful than Qi Zixiao?" The woman's eyes were slightly sarcastic. If someone else were to ask it, it would say the same thing. Otherwise, it would have been smashed long ago. Rinpoche spread his hands. Slap. As soon as he finished speaking, Rinpoche received another slap. The woman first slapped him, then gently stroked his cheek as if she was caressing her lover's cheek. "Does it hurt?" Rinpoche gritted his teeth. This woman was simply a crazy knife. He then smiled and said, "I don't think I lost out. I think all the men in the world are willing to take this slap." "It's good that you're not angry." The woman smiled happily. "You are so obedient that I can't bear to hit you." Chapter 942. Although the woman said this, Rinpoche knew that he wouldn't die for the time being. Otherwise, he would have died just now. Since the other party didn't kill him immediately, it meant that there was something on him that she wanted. The problem was how important the thing she wanted was to her. Otherwise, she could still kill him at any time. Rinpoche wasn't too worried about this since he had too many things in his mind. The next problem was, how could he survive and find a way to escape from his opponent? He had to do it within 4 days. This was because he would be returning to Earth in 4 days. Think about it. If he suddenly disappeared, the other party would be confused. If he suddenly appeared and saw the other party's face, he would be confused. Overall, Rinpoche analyzed the situation and realized that there was good news and bad news. The good news was that he had found the person behind the scenes. The bad news was he was caught by the other party. In any case, he had found the person behind the scenes, right? At least he found some clues. Half of the purpose of coming here was accomplished. The other half was how to go back alive and turn around to find a big treasure. If something went wrong, the Empress would really become a widow. Rinpoche thought about it and smiled. The more this was the time, the more he had to smile. "How should I address you, big sister?" As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a stinging pain on his face. "Aren't you going to ask why I hit you?" The woman smiled brightly. "A woman like you can be forgiven no matter what you do. Since I have to forgive you, why ask?" Rinpoche's face was burning, but his expression didn't change at all. He was smiling as brightly as the other party. At this point, he was completely in the zone. He had thrown aside his identity and the pampered life he had been living for the past few years. Now, he just wanted to survive and find a chance to escape. As for revenge, that was something to be done after he escaped. "I'm starting to understand why Qi Zixiao likes you," the woman suddenly said. Rinpoche smiled and didn't say anything. "I've seen a lot of shameless people, and I've also seen a lot of two-faced people, but it's really rare to see someone like you," the woman said faintly. "As for my name, it's fine to tell you so that you can die without knowing. Yun Yuhan. I don't think anyone knows this name." Rinpoche was moved. No one knew this name? In other words, he wasn't on the expert ranking? Was it because the other party had used a pseudonym? Or was there some other reason? There was no need for Yun Yuhan to give him a fake name at a time like this. Yun Yuhan should be his real name. But Su Wuming was there, but this person wasn't. It had always been a mystery who created the ranking of the world experts. It was only known that it would appear every year. Yun Yuhan threw him into a side room and said with a smile, "Stay here for now. Don't even think about escaping. With your strength, you won't be able to escape. The treatment is better than I thought." Rinpoche looked around. He then looked at Yun Yuhan and asked, "How are you going to treat me next? What do you want to know from me? Let me say this first, don't think about torturing me. I'm afraid of pain. You can consider seducing me. Maybe I'll confess." Yun Yuhan smiled as she watched Rinpoche's performance. She moved closer to Rinpoche and directly rammed him with the ball. Two soft mounds on her chest and a delicate fragrance assailed his nostrils. "How do you want to seduce you?" Her soft words directly blew into Rinpoche's ears with hot air. Rinpoche deliberately took a step back and said, "First, tell me what you want since you didn't kill me and brought me here." Yun Yuhan followed closely behind and gently blew into his ear. "Now that there's no one to disturb us, you and I have time to talk." Seeing that she was sticking close to him, Rinpoche made up his mind and lowered his head slightly. "A man and a woman alone in a room. Why don't we do something more meaningful?" "What do you want to do?" Yun Yuhan asked with a cold look in her eyes. "For example, dance? To be able to dance with a woman like you, I wouldn't trade it even if I became an immortal." Rinpoche reached out to grab Yun Yuhan's hands. Her movements were a little unnatural, and Rinpoche noticed it. He immediately knew that she was a paper tiger. However, she wanted to see what tricks he was playing, so she let him grab her hands. "You wouldn't trade it even if you became an immortal?" Yun Yuhan said in a charming voice full of ridicule. "What's there to die for? I'm willing to be a mandarin duck and not envy immortals. Mandarin ducks are really enviable. Don't you see me when I come and go? I hate embroidery of a lone luan on the curtain so that I can paste a pair of swallows on the door curtain. Swallows fly around the painted beam, and the curtain is covered with tulips. Patches of clouds touch the hair of cicadas, and the slender moon turns yellow." As Rinpoche spoke, he put one hand on his waist and the other on his shoulder. He recited a part of Chang, an ancient meaning without the beginning and end, hummed a canon, and led her to dance in the center of the room. Yun Yuhan's eyes flickered, and she suddenly stopped smiling. She let Rinpoche lead her to dance like a puppet. It had to be said that she was much better at learning than the Empress. After stepping on Rinpoche a few times, she knew what to do. Rinpoche and the Empress had danced to the same song a few times, but at that time he felt sweet in his heart. At this time he was holding a soft body, but his heart was freezing cold. Both of them were smiling, but they were holding a knife in their hearts. The only difference was that Rinpoche had what she wanted, and this was what he was relying on. Other than that, everything was in her hands. On the other hand, the other party treated him like a monkey in her palm and was very interested in enjoying the novel experience that he brought. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 943. After the dance, Yun Yuhan took a step back and slapped him in the face. Stay here. Someone will come and ask you. After saying this, Yun Yuhan left the room. Renbaqian touched his cheek and felt a burning pain. His eyes were full of fierceness like a ferocious tiger, but he restrained it after a while. He had just come up with this idea and immediately made such a choice just for an opportunity. It might not necessarily be useful, and he didn't need the other party to have a good impression of him. As long as the other party hesitated at the critical moment, it would be enough. In times of survival like this, every opportunity had to be grasped. Perhaps one could save his life. Although this wasn't the only opportunity, Renbaqian always felt that he was more talented in this area. Of course, the premise was that the other party wasn't the kind of person who had seen countless men. If that was the case, Renbaqian reckoned that he would be swallowed whole. He had never felt that he was smarter than the people of this world. Except for the aboriginals. Fortunately, some of the details just now made him realize that the other party was just a paper tiger, which was good news. Yun Yuhan said that someone would come, but he didn't know who it would be. Could it be Su Wuming? How many people were there in this organization? What kind of organizational structure was it? What was Su Wuming's position in it? What about Yun Yuhan? If he took the initiative to surrender, he didn't know if he would have more opportunities. He would disappear every 7 days, and this couldn't be changed. He wouldn't be able to keep up the pretense of civility for long. Would the Empress be very worried about his disappearance? He was afraid that she would go straight to the Yun Nation from Lon City, and probably do something extreme. He was still careless. While he was looking for the other party had already prepared a trap and was waiting for him to crash into it. However, the change was so fast that he and the others were caught off guard. Even if they were more careful, as long as he was still investigating this matter, it would be inevitable. Renbaqian thought about it, then found a place to close his eyes and rest while waiting for someone to come. After about half an hour, Renbaqian felt something strange around him. He opened his eyes and saw a scholar with a long beard sitting on a chair not far away, looking at him with a smile. Another spirit wheel expert, Renbaqian thought. To be able to appear in front of him without him noticing, this person was undoubtedly a spirit wheel expert. Renbaqian nodded politely and asked, "How should I address you?" "Wen Shaoxing." The scholar smiled. Renbaqian thought for a while and realized that he hadn't seen this name on the list of experts before. It was another person who wasn't on the list. "What is your purpose?" "Pretty much what you're thinking. Warriors of love and peace." "Work hard for world peace?" Renbaqian asked with a smile. The other party's smile froze for a moment. As a person who thought highly of himself, it was inevitable for his heart to waver when he was evaluated in such a manner. Then he smiled. It was not the kind of smile that seemed to be fixed on his face, but the kind that seemed to have thought of something interesting. He nodded slowly. "You can say that." "You have a divine weapon?" With a flip of his palm, a silver-white spear appeared in front of him. Wen Shaoxing looked at it carefully, and an unknown light flashed in his eyes. It's 6 feet and 3 inches long, gold and silver in color, and there are patterns of the listening rain flower on the spear body. It is indeed Ting Yu's listening rain spear. Renbaqian's gaze froze. Even he didn't know what the pattern on the spear was, but the other party actually recognized it at a glance. With such a good understanding of Ting Yu's spear, Renbaqian increasingly suspected that the other party was the same group of people who made the list of experts. "I'm very curious as to why Ting Yu's divine weapon didn't dissipate and instead fell into your hands. I heard that before Ting Yu died, he shouted, 'Where's my spear?' in a voice filled with grief and indignation. It seems that this listening rain spear fell into your hands before he died." Renbaqian's eyes flickered. The other party even knew about this matter. At that time, in addition to the aboriginals, There were some experts from the Jing tribe, and there seemed to be some commoners. The other party might have gotten the news from them. Are you really doing this for the survival of the human race? Ren Baqian asked instead of answering. That's right. You really do know. Nothing is more important than the survival of the entire race. This is righteousness. Unfortunately, there are always some people who like to do stupid things and bring the entire race to the brink of destruction. When Xiaoxing looked at Ren Baqian with regret. So, you kill the future of the human race time and time again? Ren Baqian asked with slight sarcasm. He wanted to disturb the other party's state of mind and make them doubt whether everything they did was right. At that time, he would have a better chance. The future? If that future is the destruction of the entire human race. You are too arrogant. You don't know what you are facing. This isn't the only group of humans. Ren Baqian said with a faint smile, his eyes full of mockery. When Xiaoxing suddenly froze and tensed up like a creature whose tail had been stepped on. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he asked, "What did you say?" I said that the human race isn't limited to this group of people from the land of exile. 2 groups of humans escaped back then, and the other group is at the other end of the sea. Ren Baqian said calmly. After listening to Ren Baqian's words, when Xiaoxing suddenly laughed and asked, "Do you know what is in the sea? If it weren't for your last sentence, I would have been really scared by you. It's nothing more than storms and beasts." Ren Baqian was actually relying on guessing, but when it came to the sea, he only knew about these things. Do you know about submarines? Do you know about ironclad ships? Do you know about satellite navigation? Do you know about Yamato warships? Do you know about sea? Ren Baqian threw out a bunch of words that the other party couldn't understand before saying calmly, "You are just a group of people with limited vision and thinking. You hide in your own world and live in fear. You think that you are doing this for the entire human race, but in fact, you are just pitiful people who are afraid of everything." His expression was arrogant, as if the person in front of him wasn't a spirit wheel expert who could easily crush him, but a dog that could be seen everywhere. The other party didn't care about his expression and just stared blankly at Ren Baqian as if he was shocked by his series of words that he didn't understand. "You? That's right. I'm a pioneer who came from that land. In fact, it's not just me. We have sent dozens of people out over the years, and each time, we split up and went in different directions to search for One Piece. You are just an unexpected gain for me. We have done far more than you can imagine. We can communicate with each other over long distances, and each of us can know what is happening in our land at any time. We have weapons that can destroy the world. We have eliminated the Zerg and the Protoss, and our next goal is to recapture our homeland. When I set foot on this land and found you, who share the same bloodline as us, I was shocked by your backwardness. You haven't developed for thousands of years and are even weaker than before." Ren Baqian's face was full of pride, deeply proud of the land he was on. It's really hard to imagine that as humans, you have fallen so far. Ren Baqian shook his head slightly, and his eyes were full of resentment. What makes it even harder for me to imagine is that in this land, there is actually a group of people like you who think that they are righteous, but have actually become a cancer. As for Wen Xiaoxing, his face was full of confusion. Chapter 944. When Xiaoxing's eyes flickered, Ren Baqian's words had a great impact on his worldview. Ren Baqian's gaze made him feel like he was a fool. Nonsense. When Xiaoxing used all his strength to open his mouth and spit out 4 words. A bunch of nonsense? Ren Baqian was arrogant and looked at Wen Xiaoxing as if he was looking at a lousy person. He said, "You're all a bunch of losers." Although Wen Xiaoxing did not know what this word meant, he could imagine that it was not something good. The world has changed. Can't you see it? Can't you see the war between Dayo and Great Xia and the Yun Nation? Can't you see those weapons that have never appeared before? Why were Dayo's troop movements, joint attacks, and pincer attacks so accurate? Why is Dayo's army able to be commanded so easily? Are you guys blind? Of course, those things may be beyond your imagination. I can only say that your imagination can't keep up with reality. Renbaqian's face was full of pity. Wen Shaoxing only felt a stuffiness in his chest, making him almost unable to breathe. He was indeed studying the changes in Dayo's army. However, Renbaqian's words were like a hot knife stabbing into his chest. He couldn't even imagine what others could do. How sorrowful was this? Lan City has become a city that never sleeps. I'm sure all of you have heard about the chandeliers that cover the entire city. Don't you know anything about the forging factories built all over the Chuyun mine? These are only the most superficial techniques. However, if you want to develop them on your own, with your state of not making any progress for thousands of years, I'm afraid it will take hundreds or even thousands of years. Those glasses, mirrors, these little things that I took out casually, yet you can't even do them. What face do you have to question me? Nonsense? I think you are the ones who are ignorant. In my opinion, you are a group of primitive people surrounding a leaf. Do you know what primitive means? It was the state of eating raw meat and drinking blood before humans could use flames. You faced an enemy of the past and thought that you could not defeat it, so you begged for your lives. However, we have already reached a point that you could not even imagine. At this moment, Renbaqian was in the zone again. He was either proud, regretful, pitiful, or disdainful. He had created the image of a visitor from an advanced civilization and was looking down on the natives who were just eating and waiting to die. With Renbaqian's reprimand, Wen Shaoxing's face alternated between green and white. Finally, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was deathly pale as he staggered out the door. Vomiting blood? Does this person have a fragile heart? Renbaqian touched his bald head. He was obviously surprised by the power of his words. However, his sudden inspiration was not bad. No matter who was behind the other party, they would not easily make a move on him. Even if there was a hidden foreign race behind them, they would definitely find a way to find out the location and strength of the country he made up. If they were really just a bunch of brainless humans, it would be even easier to deal with them. Playing the role of a visitor from a highly civilized country that had developed for thousands of years was much more effective than playing the role of a snake or scorpion. In any case, he had so many things in his hands. Renbaqian touched his body. The grenades and sugar bags that were originally in his pocket had all been shaken off when Yun Yuhan grabbed them. After all, his reputation as a poison warrior was quite intimidating. However, it didn't matter. There were too many things that he could prove. Back then, he had always been afraid of letting others know that he was a visitor from a foreign land. Unexpectedly, he now had to work hard to make people believe that he was a visitor from a foreign land. Next, it would depend on the effect of the 10 million word outline that he had just boasted. Not long after, Renbaqian felt his vision darken. A person appeared in front of him and stared at him. It was Yun Yuhan. What did you do to Wen Shaoxing? There was no anger in Yun Yuhan's eyes, but deep doubt. I just told him some big truths. Renbaqian spread his hands. Do you want to hear it? Not interested. As for you, your life is in my hands now. You are a smart person, so you'd better behave. Yun Yuhan said slowly. Her voice was very charming and soft, but there was a chill in it. Don't worry. I'll wait for you to send me back. Renbaqian chuckled. Pow. If you die, I will send your head back and bury it with Qi Zixiao. Luo Qiu shouted. Yun Yuhan laughed. Renbaqian's smile didn't change. There was a flame burning in his heart that wanted to burn the person in front of him to ashes. It's still too early to shout about killing. I'm curious about something. Have you ever tasted a man? Do you want me to try? Han's finger moved along Renbaqian's cheek, neck, and finally reached Renbaqian's shoulder blade. Following which, Renbaqian felt a sharp pain coming from his shoulder blade. His opponent's finger had forcefully pierced into the lower part of his shoulder blade. The yang boosting technique had strengthened his skin, but this finger only caused him to exert a little more strength. After piercing a knuckle, Yun Yuhan pulled her finger out, put her face close to his shoulder blade, and gently licked his wound with her tongue. Renbaqian seemed to not feel the pain and smiled even more brilliantly. Do you know that there is a saying in our world called thorny roses? Roses are the most beautiful flowers, but they have thorns. If you want to pick a rose, You will always be pricked until you bleed. Thorny roses. Very interesting. Yun Yuhan licked the blood from Rinpoche's wound. The corner of her mouth was stained with some blood, and she looked even more coquettish. After Yun Yuhan left, Rinpoche walked to the mirror and looked at himself. There was a hole in his clothes, and inside the hole was a wound as thick as a finger. After Yun Yuhan licked it, the wound actually stopped bleeding. However, Rinpoche was a little worried that he wasn't poisoned. Yun Yuhan's fingernails were all highly toxic. Perhaps this was the reason why she licked it? Was her saliva detoxifying him? Or did she have the antidote in her mouth? He had to admit that this woman was simply crazy. If he had the chance, he would kill her first. In the evening, when Shaoxing appeared in front of Rinpoche again, his face was still a little pale, but it seemed that he was fine. Seeing the wound on Rinpoche's body, when Shaoxing frowned and then smiled at him. This kind of thing won't happen again. Rinpoche playfully asked, "Is your status higher than hers?" When Shaoxing shook his head, "You will know this in the future. I can only tell you that this kind of thing won't happen again. I would like to hear you continue to talk about that continent." In fact, when Shaoxing was already 30% convinced. After all, some things could be seen. Judging from some of the aspects that Rinpoche had shown, Rinpoche was indeed not from the Yun nation, Great Xia, or the Chen nation. In that case, what he said was very likely true. Although Rinpoche was exaggerating, when Shaoxing felt that it didn't seem like a lie. Rinpoche smiled and sat there, telling him how the human race arrived on the continent of Valoran, gained a foothold on the coast of Dalmatia, fought for the next piece of land from the natives, defeated Galen, the goddess of Dalmatia, Lux, and finally unified the entire continent of Valoran. After that, the human race also developed rapidly. While they were exploring the surrounding waters, they encountered the Zerg and the Protoss, who called themselves the Protoss, and a war broke out between the three parties. In the end, the human race used nuclear weapons to destroy the Protoss Templars and won the war. However, after that, the human race discovered that the Protoss race was a race that had been driven out of One Piece, which contained a huge secret of this world. Therefore, the entire human race began the Age of Discovery and searched for the legendary One Piece. Looking at Wen Shaoxing, who was listening attentively, Rinpoche felt that he was really a web novelist who had been delayed. What you see is only a small part of this world. Rinpoche stretched out his pinky and gestured. After Rinpoche finished speaking, Wen Shaoxing was in a daze. What Rinpoche said was too exaggerated. However, it was too real. The Protoss Templars, Dark Templars, Dragon Knights, Consul, Marauders, Observers, the Zerglings, Hydralisks, King Zergs, Lurkers, Wyverns, Queen Zergs, Rinpoche's description of the abilities and appearances of these things that he had never heard of before was too realistic. It was as if they existed in this world. The human race had really encountered such enemies before. Otherwise, there was no way to create two such realistic races in such a short period of time. Not to mention the natives of the continent of Valoran. If he hadn't experienced it himself, it would have been hard for Wen Shaoxing to believe that someone could weave such a truthful lie in such a short period of time. In his heart, the truthfulness of Rinpoche's words had risen from 30% to 70%. Let me set a small goal first. Carrot remembers in Bei. Chapter 945. When Shaoxing sat there for a long time without saying a word. His expression was very interesting. In the end, he left without saying a word. He went back to reorganize the incredible things he had heard today. In his heart, there was also a little yearning. There was another group of humans in the past? To this extent? Compared to them, they should really be ashamed. He just couldn't figure it out. They were all humans, so what kind of fortuitous encounters did they have? How did they reach their current level? That night, Rinpoche slept well. After realizing that his life was not in danger for the time being, he let go of his worries. The only thing that worried him was the Empress. He had to find a way to contact her. However, Wen Shaoxing hardly fell asleep. He spent the whole night thinking about the things that Rinpoche had described, and images formed in his mind. The next morning, Rinpoche was moved again. This time, not only Yun Yuhan but also Wen Shaoxing left with him. In this stronghold, the two of them should be the ones with the highest positions. Wen Shaoxing originally had other things to do, but what Rinpoche said was so important that it would even affect the future direction of their organization. As such, their original plans had to be temporarily postponed. Before he set off, he probed, "Send someone to inform Qi Zixiao that I'm fine." Although it was a probing question, his tone was unquestionable. After all, this was befitting of his current identity. A strange smile appeared on Yun Yuhan's face. She gently stroked Rinpoche's face with her fingers. It was cold to the touch, but it was charming and gentle to the touch. Ahem! Wen Shaoxing gave a dry cough and glanced at Yuhan. Yuhan curled her lips and retracted her hand. "It's not up to me to decide how to treat you." The meaning was obvious. If you can't even keep your life in the end, then there's no point in informing Qi Zixiao. If you can really move the others, then we'll talk about informing Qi Zixiao. Maybe we don't even need to inform Qi Zixiao and we can just let you go. Rinpoche smiled mockingly and asked, "Do you have any other choice? Curl up here and be a maggot for the rest of your life?" Wen Shaoxing's eyes darkened and he stopped talking. Yun Yuhan glanced at Rinpoche with a strange look. She was now curious about what Rinpoche had said to Wen Shaoxing last night that made Rinpoche dare to speak in such a tone and Wen Shaoxing's reaction. This journey took a full day, and they still relied on their feet. The speed of a spirit wheel expert was far faster than that of an ordinary mount. However, their speed was slower than before because Wen Shaoxing was slower than Yun Yuhan, who was carrying Rinpoche. The direction was northeast. Rinpoche had a bad feeling about this. If they headed northeast, they would be at the seaside. If it was by the sea, it would still be fine. However, if it was on a small island in the East Sea of Great Xia, no one would be able to respond to his cries. He did not dare to place all his hopes on convincing the other party. From morning to night, it took them almost 14 hours to travel more than 1,600 li. They finally arrived at a fishing village by the sea. He wondered if the organization behind the scenes in this world had the same aesthetic standards and liked to stay in the village. For example, when they were in Tianjing Basin or now. The fishing village was not small, and from the looks of it, there were at least a few hundred families. In this era, it was considered a very big village. At this time, a population of 10,000 was considered a medium-sized city. Towns generally only had a population of 2,000. The ground in the village was paved with blue stone, and there were tall trees full of white flowers planted around it. In particular, there was a tree at the head of the village that was nearly 30 meters tall. Its branches and leaves were lush, and its spreading shade covered the 7 or 8 houses around it. There were many pedestrians coming and going in the village. There were children running and jumping barefoot on the bluestone road, and there were also fishermen wearing coarse clothes and dragging fishing nets whose skin had turned black and red from the sun. When they saw Wen Shaoxing and Yun Yuhan, everyone saluted them from afar. Rinpoche observed carefully and found that 35% of the people he saw along the way were ordinary people, 50% were man-wheel experts, and half were earth-wheel experts. The ratio could be said to be astonishing. However, after thinking about it, this was the lair of an organization, so it was very normal. In addition, there were blacksmiths, grocery stores, cloth shops, and tea houses in the village. It could be said that this was a shrunken town. Rinpoche was locked up in a courtyard in the west of the village. Yun Yuhan remained here to guard him while Wen Shaoxing left in a hurry. In a village, an old woman and 2 old men sat above. The old woman sat in the main seat, and the other 2 sat below her to her right. Wen Shaoxing respectfully told the 3 of them what Rinpoche had said to him. Following Wen Shaoxing's words, the 2 old men's faces were full of bewilderment. In fact, Wen Shaoxing's retelling wasn't as complete as Rinpoche's, so the effect was much worse. "This is ridiculous." One of the old men couldn't help but reprimand him. "It's indeed ridiculous." A cold light flashed in the old woman's eyes. "I'm a little interested." The last old man showed a strange smile. If what he said is true, then a lot of things can be explained. Hallmaster, 2 deputy hallmasters, I feel that his words are trustworthy. That's why I brought him back to the hall. There are some things in Dayo that really can't be explained, especially the weapons that appeared in the war against Great Xia and Tianjing Basin, which we have never seen before. After that, we collected some fragments and did find a problem. Those things don't have any traces of being handmade. Also, the long-distance communication that he mentioned should also exist. We didn't think of it before, but now, combined with what he said, the precise mobilization and cooperation of the Dayo army in these wars can be explained. What do you mean by bringing him back? The old woman asked with a cold face. Summon all the deputy chiefs and above to decide our future. When Xiaoxing lowered his head and said respectfully, How dare you? Who do you think you are, Wen Xiaoxing? The old man who reprimanded him earlier shouted angrily. Of course, I'm a member of the Temple of Heaven. I don't think there's anything wrong with this proposal. If what he said is true, then we are really frogs in a well, and everything we have done has become a joke. Grandmaster, do you think those nonsense dream talk are true? The old woman asked with a cold face. Maybe it's true, maybe it's false. Either way, this is a big deal. If what he said is true, then it won't just affect us, but the entire human race. Have the two of you forgotten what the purpose of the Temple of Heaven is? Such an important matter, of course, must be decided by everyone. To be honest, I hope that what he said is true, but I don't know why the two of you have such a big reaction. The old man who was called Chief smiled. I just think that it's complete nonsense and not credible. It's ridiculous to put aside all other matters and summon all the deputy chiefs just for this nonsense. The old man who reprimanded him earlier said resentfully. What if what he said is true? What if he can produce evidence? That kid is full of doubts, so it's better not to make a decision too quickly. Chief said with a smile. The momentum of the other two suddenly stagnated. Why don't we gather all the honored ones first and decide whether to summon all the deputy chiefs back immediately? This matter involves the future of the entire human race. Since ancient times, the Temple of Heaven has been watching the changes in the world with cold eyes. What we do is to protect the human race. This is a righteous cause. In other words, the Temple of Heaven is not a temple for one person or one sect, but for everyone. Now that something that can affect the future of the entire human race has appeared, it's natural for everyone to make a decision together. Chief repeated. The old woman stared at him a few times and let out a long sigh. You're right. This matter needs to be decided by everyone. Ring the heavenly bell and summon all the honored ones to discuss together. Old friend, set a small goal first. Chapter 946. Renbaqian was resting in the house, wondering how he could find an opportunity to contact the Empress. At this moment, he heard the sound of a bell coming from the center of the village. Yun Yuhan, who was leaning against the door, changed her expression slightly. It's the 12th ring. All the venerables are coming out of seclusion. They actually value you so much. Renbaqian opened his eyes and smiled. Yesterday, I asked you if you wanted to know what I said to Wen Xiaoxing. It's too late for you to know now. Yun Yuhan walked over to Renbaqian and said, How can it be too late? Unless you don't want to say. Renbaqian stroked her face with his finger. I really don't have any interest in talking about it now. Yun Yuhan's arm moved and then stopped. Her palm stopped a few centimeters away from Renbaqian's face, and he could feel the wind from her palm. Don't be so impatient. It won't look good if your face is swollen. Renbaqian smiled and pushed her hand away. Yun Yuhan twisted her body and walked back to lean against the door frame. Renbaqian didn't know what Wen Xiaoxing said to her, but it did have some effect. 2 hours later, Wen Xiaoxing returned and said, Come with me. The temple chief and the venerables want to see you. Renbaqian nodded, tidied up his clothes, got up, and walked out with Wen Xiaoxing. The speed of the other party was unexpectedly fast, which showed that they valued him a lot. This gave him a lot of confidence. What's the name of your organization? Renbaqian asked casually on the way. Temple of Heaven. Probably because there was no need to hide his identity now, when Shaoxing spoke frankly. What are venerables? The abdicated temple chief will become venerables. Ren Baqian nodded. Temple chief, venerables, temple chief. It seemed that the other party did have a lot of experts. Are you a temple chief? Yes. During the 10-minute journey, Ren Baqian got a lot of information from Wen Shaoxing. It seemed that Wen Shaoxing no longer hid anything after arriving at their lair. This organization was called the Temple of Heaven. It was said that a group of people formed it after the human race retreated here. Its purpose was to protect the human race. However, some things happened later. Some people discovered that not only did the human race not recover their strength, but they were also constantly weakening. From then on, the Temple of Heaven knew that if there were no major changes, the human race wouldn't be able to leave the land of exile. From then on, the Temple of Heaven had another task, which was to ensure that no one left the land of exile. The Temple of Heaven was divided into 8 subhalls, with about 10,000 people. The other party didn't mention the number of venerables, but Su Wuming was one of them. The so-called Temple of Heaven was not above ground, but underground. There was a sea god temple at the back of the village. From the back of the sea god temple, there was a passage that led diagonally down a few hundred steps. Then, there was a passage lined with oil lamps on both sides. After walking for a few hundred meters, they finally arrived at a huge space. Dozens of tall statues were situated in this space, forming a circle. Each statue was 10 meters tall. They were either holding a book, a long sword, or a spear. Each statue was like a fierce warrior who fought against the heavens and earth, inspiring respect. Ren Baqian counted silently. There were a total of 42 statues. 17 of the statues had a person sitting on their shoulders. There were both men and women, and almost all of them were elderly. These people were the venerables and deputy temple masters of the Temple of Heaven. In other words, there were at least 14 venerables in the Temple of Heaven. He wondered if Su Wuming was among them. When Shaoxing brought Ren Baqian to the center of the hall, bowed to the statues in front of him, and said, "Temple Master, Deputy Temple Master, Venerables, I have brought him here. Go back to your seat." The voice of an old woman was heard. When Shaoxing moved, landed on one of the shoulders, and sat down cross-legged. Ren Baqian looked at the tall statues in front of him. If he wanted to see everyone clearly, he had to look up. He then lowered his eyelids and chuckled. "Everyone, this isn't the way to treat a guest. I don't have the habit of looking up at others." "Kid, what did you say?" an old man asked. His voice was like a big bell that reverberated in this space, causing pain in the eardrums. There was also a kind of power that made people fearful. If it were someone else, they might really be in awe. However, Ren Baqian had been through the market of Dayo's imperial court and was immune to this kind of situation. In Dayo's imperial court, there were 2 things that needed to be done to suppress others. The louder the voice and the bigger the fist. Ren Baqian remained unmoved and said, "You need to maintain a minimum level of respect for a guest from another group of humans, a civilization that far surpasses yours, and a person who can bring you a future. You think that you control my life, but I control your future." Ren Baqian wasn't moved at all. As soon as he said this, the atmosphere in the hall immediately changed, and many of the venerables looked surprised. In fact, many people still didn't know what was going on. The bell rang 12 times, indicating that something important had happened and that everyone needed to make a decision together. This kind of thing was rare in the history of the Tiandao Alliance. The last time it happened was 100 years ago, when a group of warriors who were preparing to leave the land of exile were killed. Li Fu only knew that Su Wuming had killed a group of people. In fact, there were also venerables who went to eliminate the experts in other places. "You are very bold," the old woman said. "It's just a reasonable request." Ren Baqian laughed and then raised his voice. "Everyone, let me reintroduce myself. I'm Zhao, Prince Consort of Dayo. Of course, this is only a part of me. In addition, I'm a descendant of another group of humans who left the Lansong region. I'm a member of the League of Legends and the captain of the One Piece exploration team, Nico Robin. I need treatment that matches my identity. The air suddenly froze as Rinpoche spoke. The dozen or so venerables were shocked. With their cultivation and status, as well as their many years of experience, it could be said that nothing could make them lose their composure. However, after hearing Rinpoche's words, everyone couldn't keep calm. What did you say? It wasn't one person who spoke, but several people who questioned him at the same time. Rinpoche spread out his hands and asked, "Do you still want me to look up and talk to you?" The 42 statues here are the 42 seniors who founded the Temple of Heaven back then. A gentle voice said, "So, it didn't stop you from stepping on them? Or do you want to come down?" Rinpoche smiled kindly. "How dare you?" An aura came pressing down from the sky like a mountain trying to suppress Rinpoche. Rinpoche smiled and wasn't moved at all. Another aura came from the sky and protected Rinpoche. "Ningyu Jiang, this isn't in line with how we treat our guests." "What kind of guest is he?" "He's just a kid full of nonsense." "Whether I'm full of nonsense or not isn't something you can decide alone." "Oomph." Rinpoche said at the right time, "Whether I'm talking nonsense or not, there will always be a way to prove it. Don't you even have the courage to face it? Or are some of you afraid of something?" "Ridiculous." "Ningyu Jiang." After the old lady stopped Ningyu Jiang, she slowly said, "Each of these 42 statues represents an ancestor who founded the Temple of Heaven. The reason why we are standing here is that each of us has inherited the will of an ancestor. However, as you said, you are a very important guest. If what you said is proven to be true, then you naturally deserve to be treated with courtesy. If what you said is proven to be false, you definitely won't be able to bear our anger. Now, I'll give you a choice. Do you still want to be treated in accordance with your status? I can tell you that if you are honest now, it's not too late." Rinpoche sneered in his heart. "Child's play. If I show my cowardice now, doesn't that mean that my words can't be trusted?" He immediately opened his mouth to speak, but at this moment, there was a slight tingling in the back of his head as if he had been bitten by something. Rinpoche opened his mouth, and his expression suddenly changed because he realized that he couldn't make a sound. The old lady in the distance looked at him mockingly. However, it was only for a moment before Rinpoche spoke again. "I want treatment in accordance with my status." The old lady's expression immediately changed. How was this possible? Did the soul worm fail? One had to know that the soul worm could transform between real and fake, enter the sea of knowledge of others, and control their consciousness. It was an extremely precious thing in the world. It didn't exist in this land of exile at all. Out of the 3 that were left behind, only one remained after so many years. This was an important matter, so she took it out to use, but it actually failed? At this moment, on a planet in Rinpoche's Sea of Knowledge, a thumb-sized worm streaked across the sky like a gray line, looking at the ocean, mountains, plains, forests, rivers. The worm's eyes were filled with confusion. Where is this? Is this the sea of knowledge of a human? How can it be so big? Where is the pearl? I'm lost. Set a small goal first, such as, remember in 1 second. Shukju Mobile, you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.